Moving on to panel 1, we will transition to it, which will be about cross-generational communication. I'll now hand it over to our amazing facilitator, Veena Velury.
All right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the first panel of the day, Communication, Breaking Down Cross-Generational Communication Barriers. My name is Veena Velury, and I am a graduate student at NYU studying speech-language pathology. I'm honored to be the facilitator of this panel. Let me take a moment to introduce our esteemed panelists. Dr. Corey Seemiller, who just had the amazing keynote. Dr. Corey Seemiller received her bachelor's degree in communication from Arizona State University, master's degree in educational leadership from Northern Arizona University, and PhD in higher education from the University of Arizona. She has written multiple books on the topic of Gen Z and has also written other articles and blogs on the topic. She has been interviewed about the topic a numerous amount of times, including by NPR. She also gave a TEDx talk on the topic at TEDx Dayton. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Seemiller. Phyllis Weiss Haserot. Phyllis Weiss Haserot is the foremost workplace multi-generational expert speaking with a cross-generational voice. She champions the power of cross-generational conversation and collaboration to solve the urgent problems and nuances of attracting and retaining clients and employees of different generations, knowledge transfer, and succession planning. Phyllis brings an unusual combination of marketing, conflict resolution, and organizational effectiveness expertise to solve sensitive challenges that hinder productivity, client relationships, effective teamwork, and business development results. Welcome, Phyllis. Yash Tiwari. Yash Tiwari, 18 years old, has delivered 4 TED Talks and a Josh Talk, is an international youth mentor, an award-winning author of 2 books, a public speaker with his critically acclaimed debut novel, A Celebration in Tribulation, written at the age of 16. He recently has also authored Pandemic 2020, Life of the Virus, world's first novel on the ongoing coronavirus outbreak. He has been awarded among the top 100 inspiring authors of India by the Indian Awards, awarded the Author of the Year award by NE8X, nominee for Best Debut Author, awarded by ICMDR, and also awarded with Global Young Leader Fellowship and TCC REX Karmavir Chakra Award by ICOGNO in association with United Nations. Welcome, Yash. Maeve Ronan. Maeve is working on building a self-improvement movement for Gen Z. She spent the past 2 years interviewing 100 plus individuals from around the world, gleaning their wisdom for Gen Z. Her upcoming book, If I Were Your Daughter, 7 Success Insights for Generation Z from Entrepreneurs Around the World, is being published in 2021. She's a published writer and featured on FEE, The Atlas Society, The Offbeat Life, Caroline Hardwick Travels, and Be Here. Thank you for joining us, Maeve. Now, before we transition into the panel discussion, I'd like to kind of get the ball rolling with a simple conversation. So Gen Z are digital natives. They are tech savvy and screen obsessed. How can the communication be made smoother and more meaningful with Gen Z? Would anyone like to get us started on this?
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
There we go. I should be unmuted. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm Phyllis Weiss Haserot, and I am actually delighted to be here representing the 3 generations that are older than Gen Z. I love working with all of them. So I think, and I want to put the 2 questions that were posed to us sort of together. I think the medium is often not the underlying issue, whether you choose email or phone or in person or text or whatever. But the fear of unfamiliarity often is what's underlying it all. And that's whether you're Gen Z or you're an older generation, what you're used to, the habits you have. And so suggest that you be guided by 5 words, and I'll go on to explain them. So those are ask, effectiveness, empathy, curiosity, and flexibility. So ask how the other person prefers to communicate, and then, discuss that and come to some agreement about what is going to be the most effective for what your goals are, what's the purpose of the communication. Most people are going to be flexible if you ask, rather than just gravitate immediately to what they're used to doing or most comfortable with. And those preferences can be based on many things. So then you need to figure out what is the best medium to use and whether it should be, think about style. Is this a person who likes a lot of detail or just getting straight to the point? How frequent do they want to communicate? What's the pace? Do they tend to be calm? Are they really energetic? And I think, naturally we would tend to gravitate to mirror how the other person is in terms of their pace. So above all, I think you need to show sincere interest in the other person. And that's where ask questions about them, learn about them as a person. What are they interested in most? And so that really helps to connect. And don't lump people into age categories just as a reflex and what expectations there might be, because they may be wrong. You really need to challenge preconceived assumptions and all the hype that we've been hearing about generations. So, for instance, when people, let's say, Gen Z are first come into the workplace, they need to ask what expectations of them are. You don't expect automatically to have everything explained to you if you don't ask. People are busy. They don't think about it. They didn't, consider how much did you learn this in your education, your family, whatever. And so just talk it all out. And lastly, I want to say, you're likely going to have to expand your comfort zone. And that's what growing really feels like. At whatever age you are, you need to expand your comfort zone to grow.
Thank you so much for your insights. Definitely those 5 words seem like something that can be effective and an effective tool for all of us. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this and would like to?
Yes, I would like to add a little bit to that, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah, so I totally agree with what you just said. And I would also like to add, like just you mentioned, that the aspect of mutual respect and acceptance for one another and the way in which we like to communicate or lead our lives is very important. I do not think that the cross-generational communication gaps can be bridged without having that sense of mutual acceptance, mutual respect, and most importantly, I would say mutual acknowledgement of the fact that yes, maybe I communicate in a different way and you communicate in a different way. Now, let us try to bridge those gaps. Let us try to come together and collaborate with one another. Because what I have been seeing is that to a greater degree, people have not been pursuing the process of bridging the gaps of cross-generational, communication gaps as much as they should be. That is also something which has led to these gaps widening up even more. So we need to start acknowledging them, and we need to start appreciating and also, I can say, respecting one another and the way in which we try to communicate or we are comfortable in, say, any sort of improvement.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, you're so right. I feel like that those are very important in communication. So transitioning into our next topic is communicating in 140 character snippets is the order of the day for Gen Z, but they prefer in-person communication to emails. How will this impact cross-generational communication at the workplace? Dr. Seemiller or Maeve, would you like to get us started on this?
Sure, yeah, I'll jump in. I think it's definitely true that this younger generation loves to share messages and stories in much smaller word count and video time. So it's actually really incredible what I've seen from Gen Z, how they can tell a story, how they can get a message across and build excitement even in 15 seconds to a minute. So while this is different, I think, than what older generations might be used to, kind of a longer form of communication, I think it's going to benefit everyone across generations because we're all busy. The world is picking up speed and we want to get that information across quicker, get to the point quicker. So I think this is something really incredible that Gen Z can bring to the table in the workplace.
Yeah. Does anyone else would like to add to that?
I'll jump in. Yeah, I absolutely agree with what everyone's saying. And I think there's another layer too, that of course, to make this even more complex is looking at the context in which we're communicating. And I think trying to work with everybody across all generations to see what types of communication is contextually appropriate. So for me as a Gen Xer, for whatever reason, my generation absolutely loves ridiculously long emails that don't make sense. And we send them out and then we get frustrated that nobody reads them except us. And the reality is could we have said that a lot shorter? I could learn from Gen Z and how to consolidate that into 140 characters. But in the sense too, if I were to get something that was 140 characters that was all about maybe a conflict I was having with someone, that to me would probably make the situation worse. So the idea is that we need to be able to toggle in and out of not only the different platforms and mediums, but we need to toggle in and out of kind of how we even craft our messages to make sure that we are doing the things we talked about, having respectful interactions, being able to appreciate each other's perspectives. And so communication is really either the key or sometimes the break, that gets in the way, the obstacle that gets in the way of that. So I think we can all learn from each other as to kind of what's appropriate where. And I think that's not only by person, right? Each person has their own preferences on how they want to do that, but workplaces do too. I worked in a tech company and I was so surprised as we did everything over text. Everything was over text. But I work in a university and you wouldn't text anybody because that's just not kind of the culture there. So part of it is navigating each person, but also navigating the culture of where you're even communicating.
Those are some amazing points. I definitely agree to all that everyone has just said, and it's such an important conversation to have. And
but if I may add something to it.
Go ahead.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, as I was saying that if I may add just a little bit to it, I totally agree with what you said, but at the same time, we need to understand that when we are talking about, let's say, a workplace or even an academic place in general, we need to streamline, we need to, in some way or the other, standardize the way in which we are communicating. Because of course, we are going to have various generations coming from various backgrounds who have different way of communicating with one another. So in this way, we can say that, the platforms like texting one another or emailing one another, that is one way of communicating which is kind of gender neutral. That is what I feel. And that kind of standardized platform of communicating with one another is, according to me, very much essential for having that sort of connection between different generations when we are talking about a workplace that is going to have diverse generations and people from diverse backgrounds.
Awesome. So we're going to transition now to the panel discussion. And in order to get things a little more smoother and with less chaos, I will call on the panelists and try to keep your responses to around 2 minutes, just so we can cover more ground and have a more extensive discussion. So the first question is, communicating as equals is important for Gen Z. How will this impact their ability to connect across generations and hierarchies? Maeve, why don't you start?
Sure. Yeah, this is a really interesting one because I think something I've seen in Gen Z is that they really want their voices to be heard. They really want to make an impact. They want to be respected just as much as older generations, which I think is awesome, because that drive and that fire is really what's going to change the world and what's going to have an impact. So I think in that sense, the fact that they want to be treated as equals is really encouraging. And I think it's really forward thinking. In the same vein, from spending the last 3 years of my life interviewing successful people from around the world, I also want to make sure that Gen Zers don't lose sight of learning from those who came before them, and understand that it takes time, and it takes a lot of studying and a lot of life experience to get to the point where you have those credentials where people are going to take you more seriously. And I don't know if that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we all kind of have to go through that part in life where we learn from others who have more experience than us. And I think the key thing for Gen Z to understand is that you can take something from every person you learn, but it doesn't mean you have to accept it as your own belief. You can still use your own mind and your own individuality to figure out what you want to believe, and then communicate that to the world as you grow.
Amazing. So Phyllis, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, I certainly agree with what Maeve said. We all should be communicating as equals in some ways. We should regard ourselves as equal in some ways. So respectfully, courteously, and that we all should have a voice and speak up appropriately, and just as important, listen to what other people are saying, because that's as much or more important in communicating. But also we need to realize that we're not all equal in some other ways, right? The amount of work experience, for one thing, as was pointed out, education could be different. We have different talents, we have different comfort levels that we need to understand and be empathetic about that. There are different levels of decision-making authority. All right, it's just some examples to keep in mind. So there are differences. Everybody's not necessarily equal, but in the degree of respect, they should have, yes. And Gen Zers need to understand that while they should all be treated equally in terms of, as I said, respect, courtesy, and desire to have a voice and be heard, that second category of attributes might be different. Not to be arrogant, and sometimes be patient with people who have a different way of doing things, comfort level, and all of that. But that's going to really help you connect. And so going back to what we're all saying about the respect and the listening, and figuring out what are going to be the best media, what are going to be the best styles, and where people are coming from, so you can understand that and set sort of your ground rules and levels.
Dr. Seemiller, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, as my sociology background keeps coming out, it's this idea that context matters too. It's interesting when we've done, our research, we've done several studies on basically Gen Z's perspectives on a whole lot of things around life. And one of the things that keeps coming up, regardless of the question we ask, is, I just want to be heard. And I just want to know that you're validating that I have an idea that's worthy of being heard. And further, though, which was more surprising, is I'm not as concerned if you use my idea. I just want to know that you've heard my idea.
That's right.
And that has come up over and over and over again. But this idea of context is really important, because Gen Z, a lot of Gen Zers pointed out that they feel really in the dark sometimes. So if they're working for an organization and all of a sudden the organization's doing layoffs, it's like, well, where did that come from? Why didn't I know that we were in a situation where layoffs might be possible? It's this idea that I don't necessarily have to have an equal say in what happens. I just need to have an equal know in what happens. I need to be totally, experiencing transparency from everything I'm doing. And you can see this all the way in the way that they shop and buy things and vote. They want transparency. And so I think that really underlies a lot of this idea of, I don't necessarily need to have a say. I just want to know what's going on and know that I've been heard.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit to that. I think that, and not, it was even the millennials before Gen Z always spoke up to say, we want to be heard. We want to have a say, or at least know what's going on about decisions that are going to affect us. We're not making demands. We just want to know what's happening, again, seconding that, and be able to say our piece so, it'll be considered. We're not, but just give us that. And I, in working with management, I'm always saying, put younger people on committees and, even make them co-chairs sometimes. So they're going to begin to get that experience and also have a voice there.
You guys made some amazing points. Yash, do you have any last final thoughts on this before we move on to the next question?
Second. Yeah. So firstly, I would like to say that I agree with each and every point that has been stated so far. And one of the most ability, the Gen Z that we are taking over here in consideration does have a flexibility when it comes to learning. And I know there is this misconception that the youngsters in today's world are very much rigid about their own opinions, about their own sayings. They are not willing to learn much from the previous generations. But being a youngster myself, I can surely say that majority of the Gen Z that we are talking about over here, the youngsters, they are willing to learn from the previous generations. Of course, I cannot say that all of us are as experienced as people might have been in the previous generations, because trust me, the times are changing. Things are becoming much and much convenient as we speak right now. The things were much difficult when we talk about just a decade ago or so. The technology was not so much advanced. People were not able to connect with one another so easily as we are able to do right now. And because of that, I would say that the amount of experience that our elder generations had, it is much drastically greater than how we have right now. So that is something which I believe that the Gen Z is willing to acknowledge, and not just acknowledge, but also respect in such a way that, yes, we do want to learn from the previous generations. We do want to collaborate with previous generations if we are getting the opportunities for that. So just like I stated earlier, that we need to start pursuing those opportunities for collaboration as well. We need to start pursuing those platforms where people from different generations can collaborate. It is not just about one generation making the decisions and the other generation obeying those decisions or just working upon what has been told to them. There should be a transparency, as it has been quoted, and there should be this collaboration in whatever conversations are being started. Then only we will actually be able to, let's say, contribute towards something as big as the sustainable development of this world or any other serious topic that we touch about. Because I do not feel that only the huge experience of the elder generations or the fast-paced, we can say, the work practices of the younger generations can individually do wonders. It has to be a combination of both. Both the generations, or should I say all the generations and people from all walks of life need to come together, because as it has been quoted, we all are very different. We, let's say, convey topics in different way. We perceive topics in different way. We have different ways of communicating and doing things. So if we truly want to contribute towards, let's say, the sustainable development of this world or any sort of development of this world, we need to come together. And that is where bridging the gaps between different communications plays a major role.
Thank you all so much for your insights on this topic. So with the digital age, do you all still think that Gen Z cares for human connection? Maeve, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, of course, I think they do. I think it's just showing in different ways. And from what I see as far as a digital age, Gen Z, at least for me, so I'm just on the edge of Gen Z, I think they're connecting with each other more than before. Whether it's to a fault or not, they're in constant communication. They care about connecting with friends, with people from around the world through the videos and the content that they make. I do think that maybe, I mean, especially during this pandemic, that we're seeing kind of the effects of what happens when there's a lot less in-person communication, in-person connection, and it's all virtual. And I think it's kind of gone to an extreme for a lot of us where, you know, we're only doing things through screens. And though it's necessary right now, I think it's taking away some of that real human connection of being in person. So I'm interested to see actually how Gen Z adapts once we kind of come out of all of this, if they're going to end up spending more time with their friends and with each other versus on the phone, because we've had this extended period of time where it's only on the phone. So I think that's actually going to be really interesting, and I'm curious to hear what everyone else thinks about that as well.
I completely agree. Phyllis, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sure, I always have thoughts. I totally think that that the Gen Z and everyone is showing even more than usual desire for human connection during the pandemic. You know, and so people of all ages have been very expressive about wanting to be in person in school. It's hard. I mean, a lot of people are fearful of going back to school the regular way, and that's very understandable. But it's interesting that when I see students being interviewed, they talk about how much they miss being in person with their teacher. So that's one aspect of it. And also, we know that the younger generation more anxiety than any, and you know, we need to address that, and that's an aspect. But I've also found that there's a real interest with mentoring that I do with students to have connections with people of different generations and to learn from them. And that is very, very heartening.
Phyllis, you are cutting out a little bit, so I don't know if you want to kind of check your internet connection really quick. In the meantime, Dr. Seemiller, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's come back. Sometimes that happens momentarily. I'm in a place where there's a lot of competition.
No worries.
So what's interesting is we did a study in 2017 and we asked an open-ended question. We said, what to you is the good life? We had about 2,000 responses where people could type in whatever they wanted. And a vast majority of those described human connection, friendships, family relationships, something where they had a connection with people. They didn't define how that connection was forged, but really just this idea of being able to connect with other people. And so there's this misperception with Gen Z that because of this digital, connectivity, that somehow is not authentic or true connection. And again, it goes back to the way that Gen Z uses, for instance, social media, which is different than, I post on social media to announce something, to tell something, or to message somebody. I don't forge relationships through that. And so a lot of Gen Zers are using social media to create those connections and foster those connections. So there's really kind of a difference in how different groups of people are using those spaces. There's some really interesting headlines, and you've probably all seen these things like screens are killing our kids and social media is like horrible for your children. And it's really interesting. There was a great study that came out that talked about that when particularly young people, Gen Zers was the population, when they reached out over social media to create and forge connections with people because they needed help or support, and they received that back, someone responded or reached out, they felt better. They felt something improved. But when they didn't have anybody reach back out, they felt rejected. And I can tell you, when I'm on social media, I don't ever feel rejected because I don't use social media like that. And so as a very powerful portal, it's important to remember that connection can be forged in many, many places. But with that said, it was interesting. We also asked them about, what were their biggest concerns in 30 years? And a lot, like hundreds of people wrote about, they're worried that technology will get in the way of human connection, that they will rely on it too much to not be able to have those interpersonal experiences. There were several quotes that had to do with going out to dinner will be getting takeout and sitting on Skype, is what they said at the time. And I think that's funny that we're all really doing that right now. So the question is, will that revert? Will that revert when the pandemic is over? Will Gen Z say, you know what, I tried that, I didn't really like that, I'm going to go and spend more time with my friends? And again, only time will tell.
Yash, what are your thoughts on this?
So I would like to begin by saying that it is totally different about talking that, this social media is something that is forging the relationships, or are we just talking about the face-to-face relationships over here? There are two ways of objectifying the question that has been asked over here. If we are talking about the face-to-face communication, I can tell you very simply that yes, Gen Z is one generation that approaches people through the platform of technology, through the platform of social media, much greater than those face-to-face communication that our previous generations did have, much more than how we are having right now. But if we are just talking about connecting with one another in general, if we are just talking about building up those relationships, forging those relationships all around the world, or even with our kids and kins in some way or the other, then of course I wouldn't say that Gen Z does not value that, or Gen Z does not stand for that. We do appreciate being connected with one another and building up greater forms of communication. It is just that our way of perceiving the topic of how the communication or connections should be done is different from how it was for previous generations. Like even for social media, as we talked about earlier, I totally agree with what Dr. Seemiller said. And I would like to say that, yes, even for me as a youngster, as someone in the Gen Z, social media and these technological platforms are the major form of we can say platform to connect and communicate with people all around the world. Even during this pandemic, I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to, let's say, take those sessions and workshops that I was taking earlier in colleges and schools and connect with people. But to be very honest, right now, I am able to connect with an even wider audience than how I was able to earlier. Because we do have these platforms where we do not even need to meet face to face in order to connect with one another. We can build up those much important and much valued connections in our life, even while sitting back in our homes and connecting with someone in a different country. So I wouldn't say that Gen Z does not stand for connecting with one another or does not value those human connections or the importance of human connections. It is just that our ways of communicating and connecting with one another are much different than how they were even just a decade ago for the previous generations. So that is what I would like to say on this question.
Thank you so much for your thoughts. So unfortunately, we are nearing our end of this panel. Before we leave, though, I would love to hear final thoughts wrapping up our session from all of our panelists. So if you guys could take a minute to just give us your final thoughts. Why don't we start with Maeve?
I think it's really interesting what we've talked about as far as, what Gen Z is about, how they communicate differently than other generations. But I think the most important thing in the work that I've done and with the people I communicate with is, I think Phyllis mentioned this earlier, is not to put expectations on people because of what generation they're from. And I think that everyone's guilty of doing this, where we see what group someone is from, however we decided to classify them, and we assume they're going to be like every other person in that group, where a Gen Zer is going to vote a certain way or care about certain ideals or want to be an activist for a certain cause. And everyone is an individual, no matter what generation you're from. Everyone has a unique set of ideas, of opinions, of dreams and aspirations. And though the means of achieving those might be a little different based on what generation you're in, I think going forward in your day-to-day and approaching each person with thinking about what you can learn from each person and understanding that they come from a different walk of life. They have different experiences, no matter how old they are. I think that's something I've learned in my travels and something I take with me every day to treat each person as an individual.
Thank you so much, Maeve. Phyllis?
So I'd like to sum up what I think the keys to cross-generational conversation are. And that really is empathy, trust, learning others' perspectives and, where they're coming from, personalization, open conversation, and curiosity and asking that I talked about before, to be perceived as trustworthy. Actually, I wrote a book about that. You can't Google it, The Compelling Case for Cross-Generational Conversation at Work, and those tend to be the chapter titles. So since it wasn't mentioned before, I'll throw that in there. But don't blow differences out of proportion. We need to respect and appreciate differences. A couple of other things quickly. A word that I made up, collaboragism, means getting all of the generations to collaborate to fight and eliminate ageism, whether it's for younger people, older people, everybody can be subject to this. And it is, at worst cruel, and best unwise economically. So I think we need to get together on that and eliminate a lot of the nonsense that is going on. Two other things very important: vote when you're eligible. That way everybody has an equal voice. You have one vote, everybody else has one vote. And it's so important. Get out and vote if you're eligible. And also along those lines, in a way, is make sure that your family or your household has, that really affects the funding for your community. It's another very, very important thing. So Gen Z or any generation should do what they can to make sure those rights and privileges of citizenship are carried out. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. Dr. Seemiller?
All right, great. So I believe in something called the principle of simultaneity, when you can believe in two things that seem almost to counter each other, but you can believe in them at the same time. So here's two things that I believe about this topic that might contradict each other. The first one is that I think it's important for people of all generations to try to have some context and understanding of what another generation's experiences, perspectives, and influences are. I need to be effective in the work that I'm doing, I need to have a better understanding of how the rise in the use of TikTok is influencing not only Generation Z, but the world. It's negligent if I don't. So being able to see and understand this proliferation of things that are happening and the way that people are communicating without any value around it, just simply understanding, without it necessarily being one person, but just a whole context. With that said, being able to understand a context of a group of people, I also simultaneously think of something that I always say to my students is communication is never about the golden rule. You don't want to treat others how you want to be treated. Treat them how they want to be treated. So if I know that I prefer email, but I work with somebody who prefers face-to-face communication, I stop in their office and I peek my head in and I talk to them. Even if I don't think it's efficient, even if I don't think it's useful and it's not my preference, I treat them how they want to be treated because I'm the one trying to foster that communication relationship. So simultaneously, I believe in both of these things. One is we have to understand the trends that are happening around generations and their preferences for how to communicate, at least not all of them, but preferences in general. And then secondly is understand the individual and what they prefer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Seemiller. And final thoughts, Yash?
Seems to have disappeared.
Oh no, I guess Yash,
Hello?
are you with us? Yes,
We
hi.
Hello.
lost.
Yeah. Yes, I am here. So so very sorry for earlier. So I think to sum up everyone's views, we can say that the main point that we have talked about over here today is that we need to start appreciating one another and we need to start respecting one another. We cannot even think about bridging those cross-generational communication gaps if we are not even thinking about respecting the way in which we want to be communicated and the other person wants to be communicated. If we are talking about a baby boomer and we have this millennial who is willing to approach them, that millennial should think of communicating with that person, let's say via a call or perhaps, through even a simple face-to-face meeting would work out. Now, when we are talking about a baby boomer approaching a millennial for, let's say, an interview or something like that, and a simple email or a text would be much better because that is how the person would want to be communicated. So here, the main point, the main, I can say, message that we are trying to deliver is that in order to bridge those cross-generational communication gaps, we need to understand each other's boundaries. We need to understand the ways in which we like to be communicated and we like to express ourselves. And most importantly, we need to respect that. Without respect, nothing can be done over here. So I think that is what we all primarily wanted to talk about over today. And that is what we preached about. And thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who was tuning in. This has been such an insightful conversation, and I hope we can continue this conversation into our own social circles. So thank you again to our panelists and for this opportunity. Everyone stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone in panel one for their insights. I think cross-generational communication is becoming increasingly important, especially considering the fact that Gen Z is entering the workforce soon. Now we will transition to panel two, which is about entrepreneurship and innovation and how it is never too early and you are never too young to achieve your goals. And this is panel two about entrepreneurship and innovation. And it's about how you are never too young and it's never too early to achieve your goals. And I will pass it to Ali, our facilitator, to start us off, kick us off with panel two.
Hello everyone, is my audio clear?
Yes.
So the room is ready, the mics are set. We welcome you all with a beat that is akin to your ideas of innovation and entrepreneurship, facilitating your thoughts. I, Mohammad Hassan, a business enthusiast, warmly welcomes you all to this panel, Entrepreneurship and Innovation. You're never too young, it's never too early. Let me begin the discussion by introducing our panelists. Our first speaker is Juan David Campolargo. Juan David is the author of a book named Generations Optimism, which he wrote as a way to inspire and empower the next generations of doers and dreamers. He has also spoken in TEDx twice on the topic of generation optimism. He is also the CEO and founder of Optimum Smart, a company that helps advises businesses in social media and marketing. He has also learned to invest in the stock market, cryptocurrencies, and startups, and has also started a small hedge fund named Campolargo Holdings. Juan David speaks 4 languages: Spanish, English, Portuguese, and Chinese. To our next speaker, who is Jeff Boodie, featured in Forbes, Harper, Collins, Generation Z, and Work and Lean Startup. Jeff is an experienced entrepreneur, consultant, speaker, and Gen Z blogger. Jeff co-founded JobSnap, where he is currently changing how people tell their story via a 30-second video. He believes that there is disruption needed in the storytelling department when it comes to hiring Gen Z candidates with social responsibility implemented. He started his career after college working for Oprah Winfrey, managing her financials and overall business on O Magazine with interactions on the Oprah Winfrey Show and Oprah.com. Our next speaker is Jeremy Segal. Jeremy interviews social media influencers and thought leaders about how and why they've grown into influencing others. He is a very successful podcaster and a YouTuber. He interviews giant women leaders every week and helps people grow influence during his weekly virtual influence meetup. He is an entrepreneur, founder of a niche car dealership. He is the CEO of SoulMiner.io, a GPU-based cryptocurrency mining farm. He is a TEDx speaker and was also featured on ABC Action News, Yahoo, and other news outlets. Jeremy has successfully launched business in blockchain, software, automation importation, and UAV, and e-commerce. He is an early entrant in the UAV market and automotive importation market. Last but not the least, our speaker, Harry Beard. Harry runs operations and marketing for Future Labs. Having founded Open Marketing age 17, he is regarded as a leading Gen Z expert. Having featured in several major outlets, including Forbes, and giving a TEDx talk on the topic, Harry works with a number of world's leading content creators to ensure he is always cognizant of the latest Gen Z trends. Now that introductions are done, let us deep dive into our discussion. Let me just briefly explain the proceedings of today's discussion. Each panelist gets 2 minutes to put forward their viewpoints on the questions drafted by our team, followed by a group discussion. So here is the first question. Gen Z is inheriting several of the greatest challenges to our world is currently facing. How can they be better equipped with the entrepreneurial spirit to be more prepared than previous generations? Let us start with Juan.
Definitely. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me, and an honor to be between you guys, and it's truly an honor to be here. So to answer the question, it's an interesting question because it asks about how the world is having certain challenges and how Gen Z is going to have to solve, meaning that Gen Z is the one who's going to be able to, get up and be able to do something about it. And what we need to understand is that we need to have in mind the importance of entrepreneurship and the importance of for-profit innovations and companies that are going to be able to lead the change in those things. I've always think about that most of the challenges that the world's going to have will be in fields such as biotechnology, artificial intelligence, climate change, and there's a lot of issues. And one of the things that we need to have in mind, and something that we need to consider, will be the mindset that we're going to solve them. Because if we are pessimistic about the things, and if we think we're not going to be able to not solve them, we're probably not going to solve them. But if we have a more optimistic mindset towards those goals, we might have a chance. And by having the chance, we might be able to solve those. And that's something that I'm looking forward to. And as a Gen Z and as a young person, I'm really looking forward to doing something about it and hopefully solving a few of those.
Perfect. Beautifully put. Jeff, what are your views on it?
Yeah, thank you. Again, I want to say thank you for having me as well. I think as the millennial here, I think millennials, for us, we came out of college with the recession. And I think Gen Z is an interesting place because Gen Z had a good, 10-year run of a booming economy and an opportunity to thrive. But they were also not out of college yet, just getting out of college, just starting, still in high school. So I think when it comes to, history will show the opportunities that presents a generation. And so that said, I think the only way to prepare Gen Z for entrepreneurship, in my opinion, as a millennial, is to allow them that space to be creative. And, the group is in a really interesting place if you look at the education system, and whether it's learning from home now, and when you learn from home, you might have more time to create, to innovate separately from the school system, which allows you to just sit down for 8 hours, maybe play some sports, go home. I just think the current state of the world, especially in the US, I think the way the country is running, I think entrepreneurship will, in some way or in some form, will just happen based on the current circumstances. And again, we can only look back, or right now I feel like it's happening, but in a year from now we'll be able to look back and say, you know what, because of certain states and education systems change, more youth were able to take time to build and create more than ever. My generation, we didn't have a period where we were considering learning from home while in school. I mean, it's a whole new world right now. So I just think that the timing will play in Gen Z's favor for entrepreneurship.
Hopefully it will too. Jeremy, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, likewise, thanks for having me here today, and good points so far, both Juan and Jeff. But I would say, the biggest thing is just to give yourself permission to pursue what you're passionate about now, because, big dreams can take time. So if you delay those dreams because you're like, well, I need to get to take this conventional path, then you may be missing out on a lot of opportunities to be pursuing your dreams. And you might as well start now as opposed to later. A lot of people wait till later. So for example, I'm also a millennial, Jeff, but I was, always wanted to be a CFO of a company and an entrepreneur. And I was laser focused on that. And I made all my decisions towards that. So when I was 25 years old, I managed to be a CFO of a company. And it's funny, I had this big office, I had direct reports, and then I would have people come in saying, hey, I want to talk to the CFO. And it's like, well, you're talking to him, you can come in my office. People didn't expect having a young guy doing that. And I think that's true for a lot of people, and it's going to not go away. So I think that you need to be willing to ignore, especially older people's opinions sometimes in order to take those unconventional paths that maybe they can't see or they don't understand, and just give yourself permission to start pursuing your passions now, because, whatever it is, you're most likely able to be successful with it. It can just take time. So it's much easier to give that time now than it is to give that time later when maybe you're older and have a family, established in a job, can't have the flexibility to do other things. So just, that's my main advice is going to be just give yourself permission to start pursuing your passions now, and that'll just grow into something for you.
Definitely words of wisdom. Harry, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I think Jeff, makes a really articulate point when we talk about looking back, and obviously millennials had a very tricky time when they were coming out of college or university. And I think for us as young people, it's really hard to have perspective. And so, growing up in the UK, I can only really understand the UK perspective. And so for me, my grandfather, when he was born, was growing up during a world war. When my father was born and going into the job place, there was 10% unemployment, one of the highest it's, I think, ever been in Britain. And so there's always challenges that face generations. There's never a perfect climate. So we shouldn't ever expect to be owed a perfect climate. And so, as I mentioned, there's always things going on, global recessions, world wars. I think if anything, dare I say it, we've been quite lucky so far, definitely 100%, comparing it to other generations. But also, we have so much opportunity at our fingertips, more opportunity in my mind than any other previous generation. And so for us, we've been able to always pursue our passions in a really real way. So if you were 14 or 15 years old and you wanted to make a bit of pocket money, previously my dad would maybe start a lemonade stand, in a cliche term, or going to town busking if you like music. Whereas now, if you like music, you can put your music onto Spotify or SoundCloud and be seen by millions. Or you can start a business on Instagram and expose yourself to a worldwide client base. And so we're a generation that's growing up as innovators. We're a generation that's growing up as problem solvers. And so I'm really hopeful that our generation is actually going to come through this, obviously not unfazed, but I definitely think that our generation is going to come out of this in a way better shape than we all maybe expect, because I really believe that we're the generation of opportunity, and we're going to make the most of this opportunity. And realistically, for opportunity to arise, sometimes you need a little bit of chaos. I think that's the investor's way of looking at it as well. So yeah, I'm pretty confident. But Jeff, I think your point there was really articulate. Sometimes you need to look backwards to really understand what lessons can we learn from what's previously happened, and what can we take from that into this generation.
That was a very good point by Jeff, that we have to look back, because when it comes down to Gen Z, people don't actually realize that, and they think that whatever they're thinking is perfect and all. So now that we've discussed a couple of points, let us jump into the next question. That is, Gen Z is transforming the face of entrepreneurship. Many entrepreneurial Gen Zers are working on their entrepreneurial ideas while being selective about their higher studies. What are some ways Gen Z can be more creative to pursue a higher education? Let's again start with Juan.
Yes. It's a very fascinating question because that's something that I think a lot about. So, for instance, a lot of people are, because like the entrepreneurship, the entrepreneur thing has become fancy, and it has become like a buzzy word that everyone wants to become an entrepreneur. But something that we don't realize is that the best entrepreneurs, like the most famous ones, were not trying to be entrepreneurs. Like, they were not trying to create companies. They were trying to create a project. Like, they were doing something for fun, and it just basically took off. So when it comes to, if you have an idea, go for it. But don't try to be an entrepreneur because you want to be an entrepreneur and because you think it sounds cool. I would rather tell you, hey, go learn science, go learn about really interesting things, like things that you're curious about. And then you will find those innovative ideas. The best businesses do not come from business schools. Look at the biggest companies, Amazon, Tesla, whatever. Like, they didn't even study business. Like, they studied computer science, physics, whatever. So don't try to create a company just because you want to be an entrepreneur. Look for things that you're passionate about, look for things that you're curious about, and then have the entrepreneurial mindset. When you have an idea, go then pursue it.
I totally agree with you, because many people nowadays don't have the entrepreneurial mindset. Rather, they want to just have that fancy term on with them. So yeah, Jeff, what are your viewpoints on this?
Yeah, I completely I agree with what Juan's saying. I think for me, the definition of an entrepreneur, without directly defining it, is problem solving. You see a problem based on your view of the world, and you try to solve it. And if by trying to solve it, it takes over, meaning you get some traction and it becomes overwhelmingly, it looks like it's becoming positive in terms of taking over your education, then I say you go for it. Because I think those are the Steve Jobs, the people who drop out of college to continue this working on some project that's getting legs, is why we have Apple, why we have Microsoft. I tell people all the time, unless you are ready to sleep in your car, don't do it. Don't go chasing an idea unless you're ready to give 100%. Because if you have plan B, plan C, plan D, continue your education until you have something that's going to drive you beyond any mental break. I think that's what it takes. It's not as easy. True entrepreneurship, in my opinion, is not as easy as some of the stories that may be told.
We've got two different viewpoints. So, Shamim, what do you say about this?
Yeah, great points, Juan and Jeff, by the way. I liked all those. There's a famous quote, I'm going to botch it, but it's something along the lines of live how others won't so you can live how others can't. And it sort of goes alongside with entrepreneurship, because it's a lot of work to be an entrepreneur or start a business. A lot of times you have to be willing to live a lifestyle that others aren't willing to live. So, but then, over time you can push through that. And once you do, then you can live how others can't. And then people are gonna be like, hey, that guy's lucky, but it's really not luck. It's the drive and the willingness to push through all that. But in regards to the higher education piece, I think that's changing. I think that, a lot of bigger companies now are saying that, a college degree is not maybe the only thing that matters. Companies like Google and stuff are hiring people without college degrees, and some of the smartest friends I have don't have college degrees. So I think that, it's important to think about if that's the right fit for you. Like for me, I went through that route and I got my master's, and it gave me opportunities for getting job positions I would have never gotten if I didn't have, the degrees that I had. But also looking back, if I didn't do that, maybe I would have started businesses earlier. So, there's pros and cons to all those different things. And I think you need to determine what's right for you. And then I think self-learning, like both Jeff and Juan talked about, there's YouTube, there's online courses. If you have hobbies and that hobby is turning into something that might be a business, then, consider that and think about that and see if there's a fit somewhere for you with that. I've started several businesses out of hobbies that just sort of, it's like, hey, you immerse into this so much, you learn so deep into this thing, you know it enough that you can run a business or know what products or needs are out there. So it's very easy to transition from that hobby or interest into a business at that point. So don't ignore the fact that you have that maybe these hobbies where you have these deep knowledges in certain places, because maybe there's something there for you.
Wonderfully put, Julian. Harry, your turn.
Yeah, so again, starting like we did last time, I think you need to look back to understand where we are now. Education has changed so much, particularly higher education. Again, looking at someone like my parents' generation, if you went to university when you were my father's or my mother's generation, that was pretty incredible, almost unheard of. Maybe a couple of kids at your school per year would go to university. Whereas now, particularly in the UK, we're seeing the highest rates of student attendance at university ever. I believe university ratings are now upwards of over a third of school leavers are going to university, which is probably the highest it's ever been. And so, I definitely think that there's no black or white answer to this. There's always a gray area. And for me, it's always been about knowing myself. And ever since the age of 14, 15, I've always found myself learning best by doing things. I learn best by going out, trying things and making mistakes. And that, for me, was how I worked. And so I had two choices, really. You either go and take a vocational degree, because that's very practical, or you just go and do something for real. And I think the beauty of business particularly is if you're a young person and you're thinking, I'm interested in entrepreneurship, I'm interested in business, there is less restrictions to starting a business than ever before. You can start a business free of charge. You can market yourself on a global scale free of charge. You can publish, learn, try, fail, do everything you want for free. All it requires you to do is say, I want to start. And there's actually an American young entrepreneur that I spoke to quite a bit called Jalen Bledsoe. And I remember him telling me when I was about 14, why wouldn't you start when you're young? Because the repercussions of the whole thing when you're younger mean so much less. If you fail, everyone's just going to respect you for even trying. Everyone's going to have respect for you for giving it a go. And if you lose money, you're financially less restricted, should I say, than when you're older. No one's relying on you when you're younger. You don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage to pay. So you'd rather lose a bit of money when you're young than when you're older. And so why wouldn't you start when you're young? Because your worst case scenario isn't that bad. You're always going to have positive recognition. But your best case scenario is incredible. When you're young, people are always going to take your achievements and amplify it on a scale because you're younger. So if you start a successful business at 15, you're going to get way more respect for that than if you do it when you're 35 or 40, because it's almost society expects you to be doing well when you're 35 or 40. So I would just say, if you're someone that thinks you're driven by business or entrepreneurship, give it a go. There's nothing really stopping you. But don't rule out higher education because we read on Instagram, this person dropped out of university, or that person, dropped out of university, or whatever, because there is no black or white answer to any of this stuff. It's very personal and there's a gray area. If there was a black or white answer, we'd all be following the exact same path and all get to the exact same finish point, and we don't. So don't take what you read online as black or white. There's always a gray area, and make sure it's personal to how you're feeling about your personal situation, about how you are as an individual.
Very true. Now that all the panelists have put forward their viewpoints, let us go into the panel discussion. The first point that I would like to discuss is that entrepreneurship has always been about profit and success, which is still a necessary outcome. However, Gen Z care less about the profits and numbers and more about freedom, experience, and value. What are your thoughts about it? So since it's a panel discussion, it's an open discussion. So who would like to go first? Anyone?
I could go first.
Perfect. Juan.
So when we talk about change in entrepreneurship and for-profit and everything else, we need to think about what the type of innovation that we're trying to do and what the goal is. For the most part, I believe that we should always try to do things that are for profit, not because we want to make money, become billionaires, but because we have a lot of incentives aligned. For example, if I want to create something and my donor, my donor, if I do like a nonprofit, my donor or my someone who gave me a grant isn't so doesn't agree with you on your idea, you are you are prevented from doing that because of your donor. So when you do something for profits, you're doing something and you have the ability to help. And also, we can also be really creative when it comes to creating business models. So there are a few companies where, when you buy certain stocks, you buy one and they use those profits to buy and give one for free. So we can be really creative regarding business models. And in fact, yesterday I was listening to an interview with the Wikipedia founder. And Wikipedia, I think, is the 5th most visited website, and that could be valued about at $5 billion. And the founder, it's basically about worth $1 million. I mean, he's doing fine, but he's not like a super billionaire like Google and like Amazon and stuff like that. And he was telling that because of the Wikipedia's mission of having an encyclopedia for free for all, making a nonprofit was the right decision. And so, honestly, it depends on what you're trying to do, your mission, and really be creative when it comes to business models.
I think I'd like to build off of that point, because you mentioned at the end there being driven by a mission, but started being driven by like a profit. And I think those two things are very different. And if you look at any of the really top businesses and look at how they started, they all start by being driven by a mission with the aim of achieving something meaningful. And I really think that if you set out with the aim of, completing a mission or having a why, then you hope, touch wood, that the kind of profit follows suit, because there'll be other people who believe in your mission and want to support you and want to see the world in the way that you see it becoming. And so I'd really say be driven by a mission, not driven by anything else, really. It's because every company knows. I mean, there's a really famous TED talk by a guy called Simon Sinek. I really recommend everyone goes and watches it, where every business knows what they do, but not every business knows why they do it. And if you look at all of the top businesses in the world, we're talking, right now, Apple, Amazon, Google, Airbnb, Uber, all these companies, they have really strong why statements. They understand why their business needs to exist. And if you understand why your business needs to exist, and you can communicate that effectively, I really believe that is what's going to lead to your business being somewhat successful. I mean, anyone, please jump in and give me your thoughts. But I really believe in this whole idea of being mission driven rather than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree, and let me clarify my point. I do agree, and profit shouldn't be the main reason why you should do that. I was referring to a later stage that the profit should be for profit instead of like a non-profit, because of the importance of having the incentive aligned all the way. But I do agree with you that mission is more important, that profits should not be important. And yeah, I agree with you. If you look at the biggest companies, they didn't start as a way to be billionaires or as a way to create money or whatever. That was just a project. It was just a project that basically just got traction and took off. So I do believe in the mission, but when it comes to the business models, again, like a later stage, being a for-profit makes a lot more sense because of the incentive that are aligned.
Yeah, and I'd second, Harry's opinion on knowing your why. I actually have a podcast called Why Influence, because I drill into why people are sharing, because I think it's so important to really dive into your why. So for entrepreneurship, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? I think that's the number one thing. And Harry said it earlier too, is to know yourself. So I think you've been hitting a lot of powerful points that are really important to entrepreneurs. Is if you know yourself and you know your why, then just stay aligned to that, and opportunities will come up. But as far as moving from profit and success to freedom and experience, from the question, I would say that I think that that's always been a drive for a lot of people. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but not because of the money. I was never driven by the money. It's more about impact and lifestyle. And I think that it's still true today with the Gen Z generation. And I think it's true for the older generations. It's harder to see that, I think, in the older generations. but like, and then there's the whole dynamic of freelance versus entrepreneur. Some people are like, it's a freelancer, really an entrepreneur. Those are all nuances to definitions. And, you know, depending on how you look at it, it can go either way. But I think that a lot of people want a good lifestyle, and that's, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. And entrepreneurship can oftentimes allow that. As with normal jobs nowadays, a lot of them offer work from home, flexible working hours, things of that nature. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to have a flexible lifestyle anymore either. And then, you know, in the future, when we all have universal income and don't have to work anyway, you know, then it's like, well, what's going to drive you there? So you really have to know your why for all that.
Okay.
And Jeremy, I think, sorry to jump in, but I think you also make a really good point there, where this idea of, you know, you don't really operate for profit. We almost operate for the freedom of the lifestyle afterwards. It's something that has been around across history. I mean, the Dalai Lama has made so many famous sort of statements talking about how he finds man so interesting because he works for money and then gives up his time, and, you know, etc. And talking about how at the end of our life, when we give up chasing money, we then run out of time. And so, you know, there's also Chinese proverbs which, when translated, basically say things like, if you work a job you love, then you'll never work a day in your life. I'm sure we've all heard it. And so, yeah, I think, again, when you're a young person, you get lost in the source and believe that, like, oh yeah, we're the first generation that care to do stuff that's not money driven. Like, that's just not true. I think every generation has always seen money as a vehicle to living the lifestyle we want. But I definitely think now, with companies having more pressure to really focus on a mission and focus on a why, that we can really easily find jobs in companies that we can go and work for. And if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to work for a company, if you want to start your own company, then you can have a company that really works towards a mission and almost, you know, is partly the lifestyle you probably want to go and live. You know, a lot of people, when they retire, go and work for charities doing something that really means something to them. But now we have the opportunity to do that in our working life as well. I think that maybe is potentially where a lot of companies have changed in recent years. But yeah, I think your point about looking back again, that we aren't facing a new sort of weird sort of, oh yeah, we all want to be free. Like, people have always felt that. And I think that's a really crucial point to raise.
Very true.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeremy. I think I'll just add one thing real quick, that when I look at entrepreneurship, I generally think of the individual or maybe the co-founder who's pushing an idea forward, and maybe that though their vision is less about profit, but as you build a team, there'll be others who don't have the vision. I think the thing about entrepreneurship is that, like, you, if you're singular, have this vision or this passion for whatever you're doing, but as you bring people in, they're never going to have the same passion. I mean, if you find someone who has as much passion as you, consider yourself lucky, because most people will join in for some other reason. And so with that said, I think when I look at this question, I look at it as the individual deciding, this is how I want to move forward. But then as you build a team, there'll be people around you who don't have that same vision, but continue to make the company successful while you lean on your reasoning why as the entrepreneur, if that makes sense.
Perfectly put. Now that we've got diverse points from all of you panelists, let us move on to the next topic of discussion. That is almost 2/3, that is 65% of Generation Z wants to be financially independent by the age of 30. Why is being financially independent so important for the Generation Z? Before we start discussing, let me just remind you that we've got a timeline. So let's keep our answers really short. So let's start with Jeff.
I think Gen Z may want to be financially dependent just because, again, like, we can, going back to my original first statement, it's like Gen Z has grown up coming and watched millennials go through graduating college and then not doing what they sought to do with that degree. I think for the first time in a long time, generations, you know, you come out with this biology degree and you're not a scientist anymore, or you come out with a law degree, you don't become a lawyer. I think our parents' generations, you know, you went to school with a degree and you actually, if you're an accountant and you went in accounting, you're doing that, right? And now with millennials, we kind of broke that box, but we also struggled through a recession. And I think the next generation has been able to see that and realize, wait, if I'm going to come out in any way, shape or form, I don't want finances to hinder me, as you know, as they did with millennials. That's my thought. I think that's just my thought. Yeah, I'm curious to hear what other people think.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say, people want to be, financial free by 30 because they want their time. They want to be able to live life, pursue their passions, do things that they're passionate about. I mean, they may work after 30 according to this dream, but it's going to be based on what they want to do, where they want to make an impact, and things like that. Also, the younger generation can also see what the future is going to look like. So if you take into account automation, globalization, eventually, universal income, decreases in utilities and living expenses and food costs, all these things are coming in the future. And there's no reason that you need to give into the conventional system of working till you're 65 before you retire and travel the world. You can live life through all that. And there's no reason that you need to be tied to that conventional system. And I think that the younger generation can see that.
Any other points? Juan, Harry?
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy, I think your point, again, really smart. We're talking about Tesla inventing a car, which when you're not driving it, becomes an earner for you. And so I definitely think young people are really seeing this world where actually we could potentially be earning things without ever needing to work ourselves. But I would say one really key point is a lot of young people are starting to work younger, or they're starting businesses younger. And so, a lot of, I mean, every kid knows someone who started a business at 14 or 15 in their high school. Everyone does pretty much. And, so when we're starting that young, I guess we want to kind of see the rewards by the time we're 30. But also when we say we want to have success by 30, we're not looking to cut any corners, I guess, because kids are, very willing to start at the age of 14 or 15, years where you're supposed to be kind of going to the park and living carefree. But actually there are a lot of kids who are starting online businesses and being really serious and going to meetings. And, I think so whilst young people want that success at a younger age or want to be financially independent, they're willing to work from a younger age. But also I think it goes back to our point of being driven by a why. A lot of kids, again, I want to, by the time I'm 30, be independent so I can start to work for things that matter to me. And I think there is still this, whilst a lot of companies are very why and mission driven, not every company is why or mission driven. And I think maybe still, a lot of young people maybe don't realize that a lot of companies are driven by why and a mission. So I think maybe that's why we're so anxious to get to that freedom point at 30 so we can do things that mean a lot to us.
Very true. We've got another minute to discuss this. Juan?
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, Harry, Jeremy, and Jeff made really great points, but I think there's something deeper in there. So there was a philosopher named Rene Girard, and he had a theory called mimetic theory that basically states that we want what other people want. And if we see something like social media, which has allowed us to see people like really billionaires with Ferraris and like really expensive things, and that makes us have those things when we're younger. And in the 30, we see really like billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg, like people who are really young and they're super billionaires. So the mimetic theory is playing a role here. And if we look at the past, I mean, if we didn't have social media, if we didn't have this exposure to all of the things in social media, I could have wanted what my uncle had or what my grandpa had, right? But not what this Zuckerberg had. So if you take into account that we want what other people want, we can really understand and have an answer for ourselves.
Definitely, I totally agree with one where people on social media have glamorized their lifestyle and then other people want to have a similar lifestyle. So we had an excellent discussion on the various variables revolving around Gen Z and their affinity towards innovation and entrepreneurship. So since we are ending towards our discussion, what parting few words would you like our audience to leave from our panel discussion? Panelists, you have 60 seconds each. Let's start with Jeff.
I think ultimately, I want everyone out there to realize that as I share when I speak, it's like, if you're sitting here and you're watching this and you think you have a great idea, start. No matter what age you are, just start, because the idea, if it's good enough, others will have it. And if you think you're the one to execute it, don't waste time, because in the world we live in, there's someone in some other part of the world, and again, the world's as big as it is, it's small, maybe working on the same thing. So my advice is, don't waste time thinking about it, just do it.
Perfect. Harry?
Yeah, for me, really echoing the same points, to be honest. It's, if you are a young person and you want to do something, even if it's not something that you haven't got an idea right now, but you want to do something, just as Jeff said, start as soon as you can. And for me, I see this generation as a generation that's been given so many opportunities. And I think when we look at leaders of the past, people that made seismic shifts from 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and further ago than even that, I think all of them would love to be in our shoes right now and have the opportunities that we do to pursue our passions. And so I just say, if you're a young person, there really is nothing kind of stopping you from starting and giving your passion a go.
Juan?
Yeah, I would really like to emphasize that be really aware of the era that we're living. And I like to call this era and in this time the era of leverage. And leverage means that we don't need credentials, we don't need money, and we don't need distribution. We don't need credentials. Like, we only need to have a problem and find a way to solve it, and people would reward you. We don't need money. We can actually just have a website for free. We can reach people using social media for free. Distribution. We don't need to go to a news channel in order to reach people. We can use free distribution systems like email or, again, social media. So the era of leverage is such an important thing that we need to understand and that we need to take advantage of right now. And again, if you're working on something, be happy to help you out. I'm not an expert and I don't know everything, but if I can help you with anything, please reach out and I'll be happy to help you.
Jeremy?
Great points for everyone so far. So speaking of leveraging and starting, I've been doing a lot of interviews with my podcast where I'm interviewing influencers about why they're sharing. And a big thing that comes up a lot is just start sharing, share your journey. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, share your journey of being an entrepreneur. It's going to do nothing but help you build credibility as an entrepreneur. Share your failures with everyone else. You'll be surprised at how much hidden wisdom you have when you're sharing your knowledge, especially in entrepreneurship and things like that. So if you find something that resonates with people, something that I often talk to influencers about is, if you find something that resonates with people, then stop ripping people off by not sharing, because there's people out there who need to hear your message and need to hear what you're sharing. And if you're not sharing or not sharing big enough, then they're not going to hear it. So, just keep that in mind as you pursue your entrepreneurial journey or sharing journey, that it's helpful to keep sharing that. And again, like Juan said, if I can help in any way, please feel free to connect with me or reach out anytime. Happy to help.
Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you for coming here today. And anyone wants to say, like, how do you guys felt about the platform in general and something? Different points ahead. So perfect. Thank you again for coming here. We definitely have discussed many things that our audiences might have expected and wanted to listen from you guys, the young entrepreneurs, the young representatives of our generation. So over to you, Pranava.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone in panel 2. That was honestly a great discussion on entrepreneurship and innovation. And you guys are all relatively young and very accomplished, so we can all learn a lot from you, especially me, myself, as I'm pretty close to this age range, and definitely a lot to learn from your experience. And yeah, I could definitely take a lot into account from that. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Ali, as well, for facilitating. That was great. Really enjoyed that panel. And the next panel will be panel 3. It will be about global perspectives from the Gen Z point of view. And we will be discussing about, and everyone from the panel are experts in their own right from various parts of the world. This panel will be about diversity and thought leadership among Gen Z across the world. We will be having global panelists for this panel. give it a minute for everyone to join. Hi, Priyadeep. How are you doing today?
Hey, Pranava, doing really well. Super stoked to
Great to
see
hear.
this finally happening. Yes, yes. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Great
thank
job.
you too as well. And Lei, how are you doing today?
Good, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good as well. Thanks for asking. A minute. How's everything going for you guys? How's the week been going?
Play after you.
I don't know. My week's been pretty busy. A lot of work for the summit. Definitely looking forward to more panel discussions. The first two went very well. Very excited for this one as well.
That sounds good.
Especially for
Yeah.
global discussions this one.
Well, I also had a fairly interesting week. It's been a lot of good work, and yeah, and I think if you compare it to the past and in the current times, the way in which you describe your work and your week, it has all changed, right? The context is so different. You're all at least in Bangalore, we're all sitting inside our homes and we're not really venturing out. So I guess yeah, it's different, but it's a good week though.
Yeah, it's really cool. And Shamim is joining at the moment. Hello, Shamim. Oh, her audio is connected.
To describe your work and your week, it has all changed, right?
Shamim, we can't hear you, or see if you can do a quick check, please. So it's getting started with the panel. This panel is Global Perspectives, and we will be discussing about diversity and thought leadership among Gen Z leaders across the world. So from this panel, we have two people from Africa and one person from India and one person from Canada, just to get a global variety of knowledge so everyone can share their thoughts. It's my privilege to introduce all of the panelists. They're all experts in their own rights from various parts of the globe. First, we have Shamim Nabuuma Kaliisa. Shamim is an experienced social entrepreneur with a demonstrated history of working in the for-profit organization management industry. Skilled in strategic planning, research, management, business strategy, and project planning. Next, we have Priyadeep Sinha from India. Priyadeep is currently a vice president at Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, abbreviated GAME, where he works on creating and providing the right ecosystem where millions of youth are potentially able to convert from being job seekers to job creators, entrepreneurs all across India. He is a TEDx speaker and has also spoken about education across various forums in India and the USA and Brazil. Next, we have Nguyen from Canada, who is a TEDx speaker, an organizer of a Twitter trending political campaign, a national finalist for Canada's most prestigious undergraduate scholarship, and the creator of a database of scholarships that has reached over 120,000 people. And last but not least, we have Mabel Suglo, also from Africa, a social entrepreneur with the passion for connecting communities with resources to affect change and create opportunities for people with disabilities and rural women from deprived communities in Ghana and taking ownership of their lives. Welcome to our amazing panelists. Let's gather your perspectives on a couple of themes. I'll call upon your names and please share your thoughts. So the first question I have is, globally, Gen Z are worried about the future. What are challenges that Gen Z cares about the most? And Priyadeep, would you like to start us off? I think you're muted.
Sure, Pranava. My internet might be a bit unstable at times. So do let me know, whether I'm audible or not. I think, of course, these are volatile times, I see Gen Z as the most sort of passionate, empathetic, really smart, like sort of a generation of people, and much better off than the ones before. That's how I would put it. And from that perspective and the kind of world we live in, I think the entire generation sees the world in both, first of all, a place where a lot needs to be done in a better way, but also, the sort of that also brings an opportunity to these people, right? And the opportunity to create a new, better world, right? I mean, I would say in about 20 years' time, the world leaders, right, are going to be Gen Z. And I think what I would sort of, like think of and say and tell Gen Z is look, guys, you have a tough job in front of you, right? Compared to where the world is today, the challenges that we face from, from a humanity perspective, from unemployment and, the sort of global pollution, multitude of challenges, right? I think to solve for all of this, you need to have a different kind of mindset, right? And it's important for this generation to build it because you will really face the heat, right? And I feel that while the current sort of generation and the millennials are now starting to become global leaders, right? So imagine a time when Gen Z folks become world leaders. I think the world, the sort of job is really cut out for them, and I think that you'd have to sort of really start stepping up, and the best time to sort of start doing that and prepping for it is today, right? So I think I would like begin with saying that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I definitely think that it's always important to start as soon as you can. And Lily, would you like to share your thoughts next? Oh yeah, Lily, I think your mic was muted.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, so I definitely agree with Priyadeep on the point that Gen Z is going to be the leaders of the world in a very near future. But I would say, because we definitely have a long history of young generation voices hasn't been heard, especially for my background as an Asian woman, I've always been brought up with the fact that I have to obey and be, like agree with the point of view of the people who are older than me, just because of the fact that they're older than me. So it is kind of like that assumption that people who have more experience than you and people who have like the higher number in terms of how many years they've lived in, they would be assumed to be more intelligent than us or know what's going on in the world. So it is very difficult for us Gen Z to break that barrier and have our voice heard. And also the thing about Gen Z is that politicians, they would listen to the voices of people, of course, but they would obviously prioritize the voices of people that will vote for them. And Gen Z, not many of us crossed the benchmark of 18 years old to be able to vote yet. And especially the fact that many of our students who are international students or immigrants, and especially in the context of, like globalization at the moment, not many voices have been heard and not many voices have been included in the conversation with regards to what do the young generation want in the future. And another point for the young generation is that it is getting very competitive out there as well. For example, I always make this the story of my grandmom. She would be able to get a job anywhere, like she would walk into the bank and she would be like, I have banking experience, but maybe I lost my diploma in the war. But they will give her the job anyways. But now we have to go through 300 applications, go through the system that would just toss out the applications that don't have the keyword that we want, and then have the reference, and then have the referral. 300 applications for one job. So it's very difficult for Gen Z to get into the job market and also just to advocate for change themselves.
Yeah, it's definitely really interesting, especially the point where you said that you just believe older people are right. And now that Gen Z is growing up, they think differently and have different perspectives. It's really important. It's really interesting to think about it that way as well. And Mabel, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so am I on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So good morning, good afternoon to whoever you're watching around the world from. So with me, I think that being a millennial is quite challenging, and that comes to the fact I will try to kind of relate it to the African setting. Here is the case that every day, here now and then, you are seeing a whole lot of things on social media of which we are kind of addicted to and all those things. And all this kind of, should I say, exposure comes with some kind of mental pressure from peers, from family, from anywhere at all. So it's kind of put some mental stress on us. And knowing from the African perspective, you are not just allowed to speak about anything, unlike the Western world that you can walk to your mommy, your daddy, and say any shit to them and they're happy. But in the African setting, you have to be intentional about some of the things you say to your parents, and that kind of leaves us with so much stress we are not able to address on our own than to speak to our peers and all those things. So I think mental health and social media addiction is one of a major challenge for Generation Z people. Yeah.
You're muted.
Shamim, thank you very much for the insights. And Shamim, would you like to conclude us for this question?
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. Hello, everyone who's watching out there. I believe for the Generation Z, what usually happens is most of us are not included in key decision-making processes. Yet we have our issues that are challenging us, our issues that are hurting us inside. For example, when you look at the African setting, you can find that the ministry, maybe in the developing countries, not only Africa, but the Ministry of maybe Gender and Youth is like 50 years old, and then is discussing things of our age. So this person is not going to know what exactly hurts us and what exactly we want everything to be known. Because for us, we are people who have grown up with this social media, the internet basis and everything. So we usually look up to what is taking place. So if someone does not come up and speak about what we want them to tell us and what our problems, they don't understand what you're going through. So I believe that as we are not included into these decision-making processes, so this is one of our biggest challenges. And another thing is, we look at the bit of climate change, for example, most in the developing countries in Africa, they don't mind about what is going to happen 50 years from now. They just do what they think is best for them. But us, the young generation, look at it and say, yes, they have done this. So what is going to happen to the people who are going to come after our generation? So these challenges we face really hurt us, and we have no way of going to and speaking to them because, first of all, as one of my colleagues has said, in African setting, yes, you don't just wake up and then say this is this and this is that. But even when you get the opportunity to go in the key positions to speak, some of the people do not take us serious. They think we are young, we are these people who are on social media, who are everywhere. So they would not take our point serious, yet we are driving a point somewhere because we are the young generation, we are the ones leading, the ones who are coming after us. So we know what is hurting them. And then the older generation also has a very big gap with us because for them, they think that we, the young generation, are not up to date. I mean, they're young and then all that, but we also have what to say. We have what is onto our hearts. We have what is onto our minds. So I believe we have so many challenges that are on board. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely some great insights. Thank you. And definitely it's important to know that Gen Z is an upcoming generation and they think differently and they may have different points of view, not a wrong point of view. It's always important to keep that in mind. And moving on to the next question, Gen Z is changing what it means to be an influencer. How will Gen Z change the world in the future? And Shamim, would you like to start us off with this question?
Okay, thanks for this question. As for the young generation, we are to change the world in the future in such a way that we are the generation that has grown up having social media technology onto our platforms. So for the older generation, this is not how it was. So for us, every solution we have for different problems in the societies that we are innovating, because most of us are in the entrepreneur world, innovating and all, bring solutions to very many things. So as we have to bring in the bit of the technology that because you have grown up with it, is what we understand. So for example, look at this bit of COVID-19. It is the technology that we are all at in our different countries. We're not going to meet, like, for example, how we used to meet in the summits before, and we speak about something, but we are where we are because of technology, and then using different platforms to speak and everyone can hear us. So this is the generation that is using that because everyone is comfortable with it. So for the older generation, it has to incorporate this into themselves because they were not using it. And even if they were using it, for us, we've grown up with it. So I believe the young generation is going to change, because even those that are going to come after us are going to have better technology methods, better than what we have. But we are going to change the world to reusing the different platforms, because that is where you can speak and everyone is concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. Gen Z will definitely change the world in the future based using different social media platforms as well. And Mabel, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Okay, so me, I think that as youthful and as exuberant as we are always looking for ways to find to kind of address or solve problems creatively. So I think we are going to change the world in the sense that we will definitely work for corporations, although and other offices and organizations as well. But I think it's just kind of a stepping stone to launching our own businesses through internships and volunteerism. So we are going to use this opportunity to learn as much as we can, because in as much as we are trying to invent our own kind of world, we can't just let go of older generations. We need to learn about work ethics and corporate setting and other things that are kind of not going to change anytime soon, or like it wouldn't be done away with all of it all of a sudden. So we are going to learn how to go about such things from the older generations, and in the process launch our own solutions and businesses that is going to create the kind of future we have been craving for.
Yeah, it's definitely a great point. Thank you very much, Mabel. And Priyadeep, would you like to go next?
Sure. So, I think there are, of course, I mean, every generation works, right? And every generation sort of does something for the world, which is unique and different. From my perspective, and okay, so I'm not a Gen Z myself, so I'm not the sort of voice for Gen Z. But from my perspective, and I see how I see the generation sort of working out, I see two very distinct and very important things with this generation, right? The first one is, of course, the empathy. The second one is like what matters most, right? So for example, for baby boomers, money was the primary focus, right? You needed to have enough money to have a good life, right? I think that was what their foundation was built on, and then the families built on that, and so on and so forth. Over time, I see in case of Gen Z, the value of money not being the most important one, right? There's going to be a good balance between money and having a good life, having a balanced approach to doing things. And I think all of that is sort of going to play together and change the way in which we value things in life, right? So a lot of the materialistic needs are going to slowly start moving away to sort of having values culturally, having values from a lifestyle perspective. You want to really balance everything, and I think that is sort of the way in which I see Gen Z changing the world, and for good, right? Because money should not be the primary driver of things in the world.
Yeah, it's definitely really interesting point of view from someone that's a little past the Gen Z as well. It's always important to get insight from other generations as well. And Leigh, would you like to finish us off?
Sure, yeah. So I agree with many of my fellow speakers about the way that we do our advocacy and how we're going to change the world, but I want to add more on the content of our advocacy itself. So I would say the biggest differentiation of Gen Z is that we very focus on diversity, inclusivity, and intersectionality. So for example, feminism. We have had the first and the second wave of feminism in the past century, starting from the 1900s, but it has always been geared towards cisgender, middle to high income white women. Trans women was not included, Black women was not included in the advocacy. And for example, the first wave of feminism, women's suffrage movement, which gave females the right to vote in North America, it took Black women half a century later to get that same right with white women. So the biggest thing about Gen Z is that whenever we launch a campaign, whenever we advocate for something, we always look into whose voices hasn't been heard in previous discussions, in previous advocacy efforts. In my effort, being a campaign manager for a Twitter trending campaign called March for Education, we protest the government's decision to backtrack the sexual health education curriculum back to the one in 1998. And the important part about that curriculum is that it didn't have LGBTQ marriage, it didn't have consent, and it didn't have cyberbullying in the curriculum. So we really want to advocate for the inclusion of the new information because we're at the new age and we face many different problems and we have many groups of people with different identities that we have to represent in the educational system and in our advocacy effort. So yes, that would be the way that Gen Z will change the world, because I would say that we advocate for change and we also don't leave anyone behind.
Yeah, it's definitely a great point. And as you said, with new generations come new problems. It's always important to adjust and adapt in order to try to solve them and find different ways to work around them. And with that, we will move on to the panel discussion. Please keep your responses to under 2 minutes just to ensure that we have time for everyone to have solid input and have a great discussion. Again, I will call on panelists to speak just to avoid any chaos. Our first question is, what are some of the causes Gen Z is passionate about and why? Would any of you like to start us off?
I can start us off. I would say environment would definitely be one of the main concerns for a young generation lately, because we only have 11 years left to implement change to prevent irreversible climate change, the impact of climate change. And we have a big burden from previous generations with regards to how much carbon footprint, how much pollution they have had to our environment. And we have that culture of gearing all of our resources towards oil and natural gas and coal. For example, cars, we need oil, we need gas for cars, and everybody uses car. And it's very difficult for us now to shift that into electrical vehicles because there's nowhere to charge our electrical cars or find another new way to fuel our system, because for decades we've only been accustomed to environmentally unfriendly solutions, and now we only have 11 years to change all of that. So it's definitely going to be one of the biggest concern and biggest priorities.
Yeah, definitely, that's a great point. And Mabel, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I feel like right now we are kind of passionate about human rights because of late with the global happenings like how Black Lives Matter campaign and all those things started out in the US and all those things. It has been realized that 64% of the Generation Z kind of reacted to those kind of bullying, or should I say inhuman acts. So that kind of shows the kind of community Generation Z are trying to create in the future, whereby everybody is inclusive, as Lee said earlier on. Nobody is left behind, and we all kind of care for each other and have that wonderful and beautiful future and world that we all want to live in. Despite your race, gender, beliefs, whoever you are, you have the right as any other citizen or person also have, not because you are not from somewhere should kind of limit you. So I think they are really passionate about human rights and any kind of advocacy or activism that moves towards that area. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Gen Z has a lot of activism going, and they definitely do advocate for human rights a lot. And Shamim, would you like to share your thoughts?
Oh yes, Gen Z can talk about a bit of the mental health. Most of this young generation is depressed about so many issues since they are not being given attention in where they are. So they end up doing things that they are not meant to do. So in such a way that you realize that most of the young generation faces a problem of depression, and most of the people cannot realize how it is going to happen and how it's going to end. So with this, if this young generation is helped onto this bit of the depression, to help the other people to also come up so that their issues are addressed. And also another point is about the bit of the climate change too, because you're worried about the global warming that is taking place, the industrialization, everything that is taking place, and they're not looking at the green structure of the environment and all that, not what my friend has said. So this worries us because we don't know what is going to happen in the future. How is it going to be? So will it be higher than what is happening now? So this worries us so much that we get concerned, but we don't know what we can do to add, since the older generation is doing what it can, but since a lot has been done to prevent from going further, so that is what is usually happening.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. That's a great point as well. And Priyadeep, do you also have any thoughts on this?
Well, I think, just to sort of sum it up, and I think there were some fantastic points brought out. So the way I see it, what's true is that the generation has a spotlight on them, right? They have been sort of, because of the global connectivity, because of technology being so prevalent, everyone's super connected, and which puts sort of the spotlight on people. Now, this has two very different consequences. One is positive, the other is negative. The negative one is that it leads to a lot of challenges. You want to look good. Depression is a real issue. Bullying becomes an issue. But also this gives the generation a very powerful voice that the generations before did not have, right? Like, for example, a 14-year-old today can raise their voice about climate change and actually get noticed globally. Hasn't happened before, right? So I think that there is a lot of positive that can be taken from this. And if the spotlight can be really channelized, right? So you can bring in inclusivity, you can bring in a lot of the climate change focus. You can bring all of that under the single roof, and you can have young people raise their voice too and be heard, right? So I think that in my head is sort of the way I would sum this entire. It's an opportunity. It's a challenge, but it definitely presents an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. It's always important to see everything as an opportunity as well, just so you can learn and grow throughout any experience. Definitely agree with that. And moving on to another question, how do you think the COVID-19 situation in 2020 is impacting Gen Z's worldwide view? And Mabel, would you like to start us off?
Okay, so I feel like if in as much as it's an unfortunate event, but it's kind of also granting us the opportunity to learn and make something good out of it, in the sense that with all that is happening right now, and with the fact that Generation Z, once they have kind of independency or freedom, is kind of granting us that kind of flexibility to be able to work from home. As Shamim said, we are all in different countries, but due to technology, we are able to hold this. So it is COVID-19 is going to make us much more flexible. It's going to make us agile, and then it's going to make us resilient, because you after this whole pandemic is over and you come out as a survivor, you go like, oh, I really was tough to might have gone through this kind of economic downturn and all those things. So we are going to come out be much more resilient and flexible in all that we do. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It's a great point. And Lei, would you like to go next?
Yes, I would say the COVID-19 pandemic really woke us up with the fact that there are so many things that we take for granted. And I would like to touch on the point of economic equality. For example, Mabel brought upon the fact that people work from home and the accessibility of having a computer and connect with everyone around the globe. But we have to look into the fact that there are so many people out there who don't have access to internet or stable Wi-Fi, or they cannot even afford a computer or a phone with internet connection. Even for a very developed country like Canada right now, in the north of Canada, we have many Indigenous communities that don't even have clean water to drink. And we have the biggest water supply on earth. And there are so many of them, they have no access to internet at all. I have some colleagues who work in the north, and every single time we do a Zoom call, they have to call on their phone. So that really brought to our attention about how many people have the privilege of just, like have all the access to the internet, like have all of those financial resources to be able to connect to other people. And that leads to the fact that for every change that we want to have, we always have to look into what country or what group of people have the power or have the privilege. So when we talk about, for example, environment, healthcare, access to employment, education, working from home, everything leads to accessibility and who gets the opportunity to do all of that.
Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense. And you're right, it's definitely a wake-up call for everybody. And Shamim, would you like to go next?
Oh yes. COVID-19 is an unfortunate situation for everybody. But in every unfortunate situation, there is a positive impact onto something. So we realize that COVID-19 has lost our dear ones and all that, but it is preparing us, and it has prepared us for tougher situations that are to come in the future. Because look at us, the young generation, we are used to things that are happening. Maybe if you're going to go for a conference, or if you're going to attend a meeting, you have to move there, you have to do this, you have to prepare this. So now when this COVID-19 has come in, it has changed every situation that has taken place. You have to compromise, you have to be home, you have to make sure that you have internet connection. So everything is turning out to be different. So we have to change with what is taking place, because if you do not change, you're going to be left behind. And then COVID-19 has also made us, for example, give priority to some things that were not being given attention to. For example, people would not look at it that one day it would be mandatory for someone to stay at home and work, which is now possible because people kept on moving from here, from there. But right now, as COVID has come in, I'm sure that most of the things are not going to change. For example, whereby people would keep on moving, go and attend this, that. So they, instead of doing that, they would organize stream live shows.
I think your internet cut out. That's fine. We can move on. Priyadeep, would you like to go next?
Sure, Pranava. And I think that what COVID has done for all of us, but specifically for Gen Z, is just brought out the glaring holes we have in society, right? you have so like businesses have challenges, right? But this sort of brought out like really, okay, that's how challenging situation is, right? If you look at a developing country like India or a lot of the Southeast Asian countries, Africa, the amount of challenge people are going through, right? That so many, a larger percentage of the population today does not have like basic access to things, right? And it just shows that we're not in a good place as the world. And I would sort of like Gen Z to take special note of this, right? And be like, okay, so we're not in a great place, but how do we start going there, right? What do we do? How do we start making the change today? I think COVID presents us with that opportunity, right? And given that, again, this is such a connected community, globally there are so many exceptional young bright people doing such amazing work. I think this is a good time to sort of start extrapolating a lot of that, making sure that these role models are sort of given a greater voice, and they're able to inspire a larger number of young people to do more, right? Because clearly what's happening in the world today is not enough, and definitely COVID has sort of like just bared everything, right? It has just said that everything in the world is skeletal, right? It's in a really bad place, and I think it's great that we got to see this because of COVID, and now's the time to like reset and start all over again, right? With Gen Z in focus.
Exactly, and that's a great point to finish off this question. Thank you very much. And another question: if we take a truly global perspective, beyond the realms of digital and social, what drives Gen Z? And Priyadeep, would you like to start us off on this one?
Sure, and I think I keep hopping the same point that it's a phenomenally a compassionate generation. It's such a smart group of people, so driven, so sort of ready to take on challenges. I feel that it's a lot. I mean, unfortunately, the world has sort of given the whole generation a context of technology, or that you guys are great at technology, but that's not it, right? It's a lot more than that. Look at the focus that all the young people have on equality, right? From all perspectives, right? You want society to be absolutely in equilibrium. I think it's phenomenal, and so what let's say the number of people in each generation who have a sort of a balanced approach to things, right? Who believe that every race, gender, every sort of culture needs to get an equal voice. That number is rising. And it's a very large population in Gen Z. Like a greater number of young people today believe that you need that. That's basic rights. It is not something that's special, right? So I think that I just feel that it's just an incredible opportunity for all of us to learn from you, all the young people. And I truly hope that the older folks can start looking at Gen Z beyond people who are great at technology. It's not just about that, right? It's a phenomenally passionate group of people who can affect change starting today, given if we can get them the right platforms.
Yeah, it's definitely a great point. Thank you. And Clay, would you like to go?
I would say I have to disagree with the question right there, because yes, there are so many unique things about Gen Z. For example, like the cause that we advocate for and how do we go about that. But because of social media, because of the internet and globalization, it really helps us with conveying our message and spread our message on a global platform as well. And that also expose us to different issues that we haven't thought about. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement recently with the death of George Floyd. The reason why that we have all of that movement is because the wrong treatment that the police officers did to him was recorded and broadcast on social media across the world. And all the issues about refugee and also the wrongful treatment that the Chinese government is doing to Muslim in concentration camps. If we don't have the platform, if we don't have social media, or if we don't have internet, we will not know about those issues and we cannot advocate for that. So I would say the distinction of Gen Z is because of the fact that we have internet to broadcast our platform. And I would advocate for the fact that for everything that Gen Z represent, like all of the content of the cause that we advocate for, we have to look into the fact that social media really helped us with spreading that message. And we really have to take that as our advantage more than the statement of, oh yeah, we're more than just social media. It's social media is definitely not something for people to look down. It's our advantage, and we have to play with that, and we have to like put that in our power.
Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And Mabel, would you like to go next?
Okay, so for me, I would say beyond digital and social media, Gen Z is kind of really driven by communism. Communism in the sense that even if you look at young people that do hang around, like they meet their friends, um, apart from the fact that they would get distracted on social media, kind of trying to look for the next topic to talk about it, that kind of thing. If they are able to put away their phones, you see that they kind of have this heartfelt conversation with each other, and with all our activism that we are doing, and advocacy and everything, thinking about climate change and all those things, is kind of to build that togetherness and closeness that we are craving for. So beyond that, we are looking for a sense of family, a sense of livelihood, a lively community where everybody gets to feel welcomed and wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a great point. And unfortunately, we're running short on time. So I just wanted to go to the end. I just want to do a short wrap up where each panelist will have 1 minute to leave the audience with the point and the message. And Blay, would you like to start us off?
Yes, sure. It's difficult to put everything in 1 minute, but I'll try. I would say that I just want to leave people with a story. So there has been a lot of complaints about Gen Z, about us always being on the internet, always being on social media, and we can never experience the real world. But if you look into the 1800s, when paper was created, there has been people that complain about paper as well. There has been many publications that say the generation with paper will never understand the struggle of writing stuff on chalk. So it's very interesting to see how previous generations always look down on the new generations just because of the fact that we are different. And I would say that we have to embrace our difference. We have to embrace, like the age of digital globalization into our advantage, because there are so many things that we're doing that are very beneficial to the community. We're exposing different social issues that haven't been thought of. We are advocating for inclusivity. We're leaving nobody behind. And no, we're taking it in stride. We're not going to back down. Our voice is still there. And if you don't listen to us, one day we'll go up and we're going to vote you out, and we're going to implement those changes yourself. So you better listen to us right now and be on the right side of history. Or, you can just wait and let us take the charge later.
Yeah, it's definitely a great message. Thank you. And Shamim, would you like to share next?
Okay. I believe the time is now, and you have to work with the older generation so that they can see the impact you can add to the communities and what change you can bring in. Because I believe we have a different thinking of whatever is happening, but then they will have to allow us bring in our thinking, because it is us who are going to be there for the next generations and the other generations, plus 70 years to come. So they have to embrace us with our different thinkings, our different everything, so that we work together and create a better impact. So we have to work together, because they have the experience, they have everything, and then we have the different thinking and the bit of what we think is good, and then that will make a very good impact. So I believe we begin now. We don't have to wait for the future. We just have to begin right now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's definitely a great message. It's always important to begin right now and never delay anything. And Priyadeep, would you like to go next?
Sure. I guess my message would be to the Gen Z, from somebody who's older, and my point is that if you really feel that you're passionate about something and you want to affect change, I think you need to just go for it, right? Because I heard a very profound quote that my boss at my organization talked about, and at a session he said, "If not you, who? If not now, when?" And I think that's something I leave the entire Gen Z community with. If you believe in something, just go get it.
Yeah, it's definitely a great point. And last but not least, we have Mabel. Would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, so I just want to tell everybody out there that, look, I'm your cheerleader. Just do what you're gonna do to make the world a better place for all of us. And speedy recovery to all those that are infected with COVID, and my heartfelt condolences to those that have lost their loved ones in these hard and trying times. Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely a great point. And we had a lot of interesting discussions this panel. Just another personal question I had is, where do you think Gen Z is heading globally? Does anyone want to answer that?
To a great place.
Yeah.
That's what I think as well. Yeah. I was just wondering if you thought they would become entrepreneurs more or more on the mechanical side, and how everything will turn out. It's always interesting to see how everything will turn out in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, what the future is going to be like, but I really hope that it's all good. And it's fantastic. It's great. And you have exceptional leaders who come out of this generation.
Yeah, exactly. That's always important to remember. And thank you very much for the great discussion. I really enjoyed all the insights, and I thought it was great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
And nice meeting
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for coming today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So far we have had 3 panel discussions so far, and all of them have gone phenomenally well. And I'm definitely looking forward to the 4th one as well, which will be starting momentarily. Hello, how are you guys doing today?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing good as well. How about you, Julian?
I'm doing well. It's just the morning.
Yeah, I feel that. How are you doing today, Samir? Hope everything's going well.
Hello, how are you guys?
Good. How about you?
Good.
I'm good. How about you?
Yes. Good as well. How about you, Julian?
I'm doing well. It's just the morning.
Yeah, I feel that. I think someone has the YouTube live stream open, so there's a small echo going on. Just ensure that all your YouTubes are muted, just so there's no echo or anything. Sahaj, can you hear us or see us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you as well. Great to hear. And here's a panel for emerging technologies. Pass it over to Sahaj.
Great. So is everyone on?
Yep, everyone's here.
Okay, perfect. So I'll start with an introduction for myself, and then we can introduce the panelists. Hi, everyone. I'm Sahaj Sharda. I just recently graduated from Georgetown University. I was one of the youngest authors in America when I published a book called The Extinction of the Price Tag, which is an Amazon category bestseller. After that, I started a company called Dinos that was involved in dynamic pricing for restaurants. When the unit economics of that business didn't work out, we ended up returning money to investors. And so now I'm working on potentially raising a micro fund and investing in the world of atoms. So that's what I've been up to. I would love to get introductions from each of you on the panel. let's start with Samir.
Hi, I'm Samir. I'm still a student at University of Virginia. I'm studying economics and entrepreneurship. I'm the author of The Innovative Mindset, set to publish in July. And my mission is sort of to democratize financial knowledge to everyone who I come into contact with through a fintech startup that essentially focuses on the social responsibility I think many people face in the current environment, and how financial knowledge is sort of not ubiquitous among a bunch of people. So, yeah.
That's great. Can we get Julian to introduce himself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Julian Rachman. I'm currently a rising junior at the University of California, Irvine, studying computer science and business. I've worked in a lot of experiences ever since high school, working with SpaceX from high school into college, doing things for the first stage of the Falcon 9. Worked with 2 other startups during my time in college, working with companies that do the recommendations for Hulu, and also doing some really cool things at an incubator as employee number 6 of an e-commerce startup. And now I am the founder and CEO of Ripplelink. We help to supercharge your professional relationships effortlessly. But in addition to that, most recently, I worked at AWS on the big data team, as well as work as a venture partner for Type 1 Ventures, where we're investing in technology moonshots that push forward humanity. So yeah, that's pretty much it about me.
Great. Jessica, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jessica. I graduated from Harvard in 2019. I studied applied math with a focus on economics and computer science, and during school was involved in a mixture of startups as an operator in both more hands-on and growth-related roles, public markets investing, investment banking in the technology coverage group, and then also in early stage venture, worked with several different funds, including General Catalyst, Romulus Capital, Female Founders Fund, and Global Founders Capital. And then after graduation, joined Soma Capital, which is a seed stage, mostly sector agnostic, but enterprise leaning fund based in San Francisco as the first full-time hire. So do a lot of everything that goes into running a VC fund, not just the sourcing and diligence, but also all the IR, portfolio support, co-investor relationships, brand, etc. And then outside of Soma, do a lot of content work. So I part-time head content for Alpha, which is a platform of around 32,000 women in tech venture and startups, and then also volunteer as head of content with Harvard in Tech, with Techstars Boston, and with the Emerging VC Association, which is a group of around 700 pre-GP investors in the country. So love content, love supporting early stage founders. I'm especially interested in healthcare payments, data infrastructure, protocols, logistics analytics, and then also exploring kind of more international investments with the China context, given I grew up there, spent the first 10 years of my life there. And so always really fascinated about different ways in which the innovation ecosystems in each country can learn from each other.
Great. I'm really glad that we're all here today for the discussion. I think we have some really interesting voices. And so without further ado, let's get started with some of the questions that I'm really interested to see what you guys have to say about. The first is, and each panelist will get 2 minutes to answer these. The first question is that Gen Z are largely digital natives. Another way of framing that is that they're very tech savvy. What advantages does that confer upon Gen Z? And on the flip side, how might that impact them getting into the workforce? Let's start with Samir.
Yeah, thanks for your question. I think that there are many different perspectives that one can argue for this question. And I'm going to take on the perspective of Gen Z being prepared for the workforce and how they can prepare themselves. for this workforce. And so I think that because the members of Gen Z are digital natives, they almost crave something else when they go to work. They want to have the ability to be independent and autonomous. But on top of that, I think they also want to have the resources to explore and be creative, and do things that they want to, and not just things that are focused on that specific business. And that helps them explore that creativity, become more engaged, and this can include anything from providing these members of Gen Z the resources to explore that creativity, to implementing different technologies that can help the business become more digital and show these members of Gen Z, that the business is a digital company. So, yeah.
Right. Just briefly to interject here, we forgot to do an introduction. Palash, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my bad for joining late. So my name is Palash. I'm a rising second year at the University of Virginia as well. I've been doing machine learning research for over 6 years now. In high school, I led a machine learning lab in Trentino, Italy. Recently, I founded a machine learning API that helps democratize the powers of artificial intelligence to the general public, called Libra. Fun fact today, if you Google search Libra on Google News, if you Google search machine learning on Google, Libra is currently the #1 trending article or #2 trending article, depending on where you are. In the next year, I hope to release information about a startup that I'm working on with a professor from Carnegie Mellon about using federated machine learning to analyze medical images. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And again, sorry I was late.
Great. Yeah, I just fact checked that it is the #2 article if you Google search it. So that's fantastic. Let's go back to the original question, which is posed. Palash, do you want to just answer that while we have you here?
Yeah, could you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. So broadly speaking, Gen Z or digital natives, another way of framing that is that Gen Z are very tech savvy. What is the upside for Gen Z as they enter the workforce of that fact? And then what are some of the downsides?
Yeah, I think that out of the past couple of generations, Gen Z is definitely the most equipped to enter the workforce, because I see a sort of conversion from normal laborious jobs to ones that are more tech savvy. That's where the Gen Z participates in that transition, right? So they make this transition from a non-tech savvy workforce to a tech savvy workforce very efficient, smooth. So I think that at a place where Gen Z does a good job in kind of acclimating towards the consumer culture and the environment that exists right now. But then there's a lot of smaller challenges that exist from having this tech savvy culture, that kind of we forget about smaller things like soft skills in the environment and what we want to accomplish.
Great. Julian, can I just get you to chime in there? Is there anything you disagree with what Palash just said?
No, I think that makes sense. The way I thought about this question is that you can sort of think of technology on like, supply and demand, right? I mean, it back then the scarcity for like emerging technology was lower. And when like, the .com boom happened, it was just like, holy crap, there's like so much possibility. And now today, 2 decades later, we kind of consider technology as an extreme commodity that you can find at your fingertips, that you can find anywhere. There's cell towers, you can go to space, and you can have internet. And so like, the power is now in our fingertips, that we can drive insane innovation, especially as Gen Zers, and having access to this information and this power very, very early on. I mean, but with that comes like, lots of irresponsibility, because we're so knowledgeable of this technology. It's not always used for good, or it's not just, it's not used to, build stuff for humanity, or it just gets abused in other ways as it becomes more and more of a commodity, versus before, where it used to be just a research product and people were pushing innovation in, AI and all these different things. So I think it's really a fine balance. But looking at it over time, I think we're extremely advantaged where we had technology at a starting point, and had extreme accessibility. So that's what puts us at an advantage. But we've really just got to make the right decision on how we necessarily want to use it and what we're building with it.
Right. Jessica, do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I think not to repeat anything anybody else has said, I think just to add on to that, I think it'll be super interesting to see how Gen Z creates their own opportunities. I think in 2016, I made an investment in Shopify since I had this broader perspective that there would be a tailwind in people wanting to work for themselves and having freedom around their work hours and what they're working on, and not even to build like venture scale businesses per se, but just to have passion projects that allow them to live comfortably enough. And so I think there's going to be a broader wave of Gen Z people looking to be employed in those capacities versus in more standard jobs or even in startups as a founder or a founding team member that wants to reach venture scale. I think obviously you'll still see people going to more mainstream jobs in big companies or banking, consulting, venture, etc. But then you'll also see more people actually working on their own terms and creating value for a small group of people, but in a way that makes them a lot happier. I think mental health as well is more or less of a taboo topic, in part because of all the sharing that has taken place in the digital world, and then even apps that are meant to help with mental health, some broader ones like Calm and Headspace. And even the founders of those companies have been really outspoken about their own mental health challenges and journeys. And so I think people are going to be thinking more about work that isn't just a way to make money. Obviously, that's still crucial to survive, but I think they'll think more about fulfillment and move upwards in sort of the hierarchy of needs.
Perfect. So I agree with largely what all of you guys said. Just to frame this question a little bit differently, the question was framed that Gen Z is very tech savvy, and yet all of you guys talked about the internet, about apps, the world of bits. How would you define technology in a more broader scale? And do you think that the intense focus in computer and information technology is almost driving talent away from other fields? Samir, you want to chime in there?
Yeah, so your question is, do you think the intense focus on IT and computer science and technology is driving talent away from other fields towards that particular field?
Right. So there are other types of technology, right? Like if you went back to the 1960s, people were much more, technology meant things like flying cars, like rockets. There was much more focus on things like, transportation was considered technology, energy was considered technology. Now, when you say the word technology, it conjures up the image of computer science, of apps. Do you see that as a problem, or do you see those worlds as converging going forward?
No, I definitely don't think it's a problem. I think the worlds are converging as we go forward, because that term that you mentioned is an umbrella phrase that encompasses technology impacting industries and companies in all sorts of sectors, in transportation and logistics and finance and retail. Everything is impacted by technology. And the fact that the workforce is slowly transitioning into this new technological environment, I think is amazing, because it teaches people to adapt. And not only that, but also the power of technology is relentless. I think it's almost necessary to move forward for these different companies to adapt to these different technologies. And by the labor force slowly moving towards this computer science heavy, IT heavy environment, they're building the skills in their toolbox to actually innovate and to actually understand how to make their companies, their industries more efficient. And so I think that the transformation from the transformation of labor from other sorts of industries to tech is very, very important. And I think that without that, we wouldn't be seeing innovation as much as we are today.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the panel discussion section. And so the first question here is that Gen Z are very confident about their technological literacy in general, but a lot of them, and this shows up in things like polls and things like focus groups, are unsure about their readiness to join the workforce, potentially due to a lack of soft skills. Why is this the case, and what can be done to remedy it? Let's start with Samir, and then we can go down the list of panelists.
Yeah. I think that the lack of soft skills is something that can't be taught, and it's something that's learned over time. And so in order for members of Gen Z to adapt and to learn these soft skills, they're just going to have to throw themselves in the pool. And these soft skills are learned through different experiences. For example, for undergraduates, it would be internships. For graduates, it'd be actual work experience. So something like the soft skills just can't be taught. I mean, you can't teach someone how to talk to another person. You can't teach someone how to, do other things. It happens over time. And in order for the members of Gen Z to more efficiently integrate with the workforce, I think the workforce has to adapt in a way, at least the conventional industries, they have to adapt in a way where they provide members of Gen Z, I think I mentioned this before, the ability to be creative, to express themselves, to be comfortable, and to adapt this new sort of way of engaging with your team members. And this means that if someone in a business or someone on your team wants to work on something interesting, don't just brush them away. Provide them the resources to explore that interest, because then they become 10 times more efficient. You give them the resources to explore that interest, that creativity, and as a result, they develop something interesting, and then they could use that at your company or at your business, and then the company or business becomes better, and the employees align with the mission of the company is profitable, and the members of Gen Z are content. And so to answer your question, in order for members of Gen Z to be more comfortable in penetrating and working in this workforce, the workforce has to provide the resources, the autonomy, and the ability for Gen Z to express itself. Because Gen Z, as we know it, has the mobility to go anywhere they want with the tech, skills that they have. So if the company or the business that they're working for doesn't provide them the resources to explore their creativity and their interests, they're just going to move on to someone else. So I think that in order for the members of Gen Z to be comfortable in working in a new environment and to work in a new environment, that workforce and that company has to really provide Gen Z the resources to be independent, to explore creativity, and to be themselves, and then align the mission of the members of Gen Z with the mission of whatever company they work for.
Right. Julian, let's get you in on this.
Yeah, I think one of the main things here is that I think it usually really does start from a young age. And that's inevitable. I think if you don't start with just like soft skills, talking to people beyond like having a screen in front of you, it's something that you grow into and you grow into naturally. I mean, as a kid, I was very much like, I love talking to people, and I just talk to anyone. When I was little, I would be the one that goes up and asks, hey, could you bring us a fork, like at a restaurant? Like it was those small things that really just stuck and ingrained in my brain. But when you see like kind of like nowadays, it's like when you look at the past and present, it's like you can see like parents putting iPads in front of their children while they're eating. I think that's a crazy concept. But I mean, maybe it does educate them on technology. It's a good distraction. But I think that there's better ways to go about that and to educate students and kids early on about it. But if that's not the case, right, you go into like schooling, it's definitely about like providing the opportunities to be able to interact and build those soft skills. But not even just that, but it's also the person that has to take their own leap of faith to start talking to people, start interacting with them, be on panels, do more public speaking. It's just something that you have to learn like over time. And I think that's what I hope a lot of people end up realizing over time, as they realize, okay, technology is not a commodity, like let's focus on other things now. Like, we have it at our fingertips, we're writing one line ML. So like, it's getting getting a lot easier, right? And so like now we can focus on these things, and being encouraged to take those leaps of faith are always the best ways to go. So yeah.
Jessica, so from Julian, we just heard that people individually need to take agency. From Samir, we heard there needs to be systemic restructuring so that Gen Z feels comfortable. Which side of the debate are you on?
I think I'm more on the latter because I think about the proliferation and accessibility of knowledge and information. Latter as in people taking agency themselves. Sorry, it's confusing since you mentioned the order reversed from how they spoke about it. But I think there's so much information and so much knowledge out there that you can either use technology, not even like good or bad from a moral perspective, because that's a whole other situation. But I think from a productivity perspective, you can, stay up until 5 a.m. watching like Minecraft videos every day. And that's, up to you. No one can tell you not to, maybe your parents can, but beyond that, it's really up to you. And that's seemingly a horrible use of technology and use of what you can do on your laptop. But then you can also, maybe, you can do that sometimes if you're super into it. But for the most part, you can, read articles or listen to podcasts that help you learn about things, or you can learn how to code, or even if you maybe aren't super quantitative or don't think like a systems thinker, which is also fine, you can think about ways to use no code or low code tools, or think about design, or think more about strategy if you really want to go more on the business side versus getting your hands dirty with code, which is also okay. And so I think these days it's much more about how you choose to use your time. And I think there was maybe when I was like in high school, so 5-6 years ago, there was like all this talk about like tiger parents, and like that famous book came out. And I think, obviously there's good and bad, and tiger parents are just like parental influence. But I think after, high school, after college, especially, like you kind of have to be your own parent by definition, and you have to hold yourself accountable for all your goals and for every hour of your day and how you allocate your time. And your parents aren't going to know how you spend your time after you move out, and hopefully that's after college or sometime in a reasonable time frame. And so it's really up to you to kind of borrow the language of like what you do when no one else is watching. And I know that's used more in like a moral perspective, but I think it applies broadly to accountability as well. And so I think you're going to see, I wouldn't say it's like a barbell effect, but I'd say that I wouldn't say everybody has access to the same level of resources, but I'd say more people have access to more resources. And so there's somewhat of a leveling of the playing field. Certainly so much has to be done within the US, definitely globally as well. But I think a lot of it is in terms of how you think about it and how you stay proactive in terms of your information digest. And I think a lot of times people will have like a victim complex of like, oh, I can't reach out to this person because they're not in my network, or like, I didn't have the luxury of working at Facebook or working at Google or like going to this school. And obviously there are disadvantages, and, life isn't really fair, but I think you can really think about different ways to hack mentoring or hack relationship building or hack learning. Like, I've never spoken to like Jeff Weiner in my life, probably never will, and that's okay, but I can still sort of see him as a mentor in some ways if I just like consume a lot of the different podcasts and writing that he puts out there on his own or through different mediums. And that might actually be much more helpful than me talking to him on the phone when I'm like probably super nervous and like asking not great questions relative to super professional podcast host who's done this a million times and knows him really well, etc. And so I think a lot of it is about having the right mindset and sort of not thinking about the disadvantages that you have. Obviously, that's really fair and that's important to know, but I think more thinking about like the next play and the next action that you can take and how you can make the most of tools that are out there. And I think even like people before were like, oh, well, I'm not really quantitative, so I can't code. But now obviously there's all these no code, low code tools. There's a huge demand for designers who maybe aren't the most quantitative people, but can be creative on the other side of the skill spectrum. And so I think there's lots of different ways to think about it.
Great. Let's get Palash in here. So Palash, two people argued in favor of individual agency. one person in terms of systemic change. Which side of the debate are you on?
So my perspective on this whole thing about the lack of soft skills in Gen Z is slightly different from everyone else's. So I think that, first of all, what Jennifer said about the victim complex, I think that's 100% true. And I think this victim complex is further exacerbated by technology, because the increase in technology leads to people just inherently being more distant from each other, which thus then leads to it being easy for different types of people to make more excuses about inaccessibility, because once the victim complex becomes more distant, it further increases itself. And like that's the primary issue with the lack of soft skills. In addition, I think that the lack of soft skills isn't as big of an issue that it's played out to be. I think it's more, rather than people forgetting about these soft skills, it's a movement towards demand in the workforce. So from a young age, parents are more likely to let kids be on technology and use technology in their daily lives, because that's what they will be using in the future. So rather than people just being ignorant towards the soft skills, it's more people realizing what the future is about and kind of adapting their parenting styles, but also their lifestyles to match that. And while that may lead to a decrease in soft skills, it's just a part of the economic and community flow that exists and how it changes over time. So yeah.
Great. So let's move on to the next question, which is about, in this digital age, does Gen Z still care about human connection? Obviously, that's framed in a very skewed way, but to reframe that a little bit, is there something that we're missing with, I mean, continuing the discussion about soft skills a little bit, is there something we're missing with regards to human intimacy, human connection? And obviously, to frame it in terms of the pandemic, with more and more people working from home, what sort of shifts are we seeing in the workforce with regards to that? Let's get this started with Samir.
Yeah, I think that human connection is imperative to success, like to any company success, to any individual success, to just anything. Human connection is like the nucleus of everything that happens in this world. So like us moving to remote workforce, to being distant from each other is not as bad, because we have tools like Zoom and other interaction software, so where we can interact with people, and that still counts as human connection. So I think that because members of Gen Z are digital natives and stuff, yes, some of them are distant, like Balash mentioned, and they don't, interact with people, and that's detrimental to their health, to their social well-being. But members of Gen Z need to be connected with people of their team, with other people around the world, with their colleagues, friends, and family, because those human connections and interactions are what push you forward and keep you up when you have a bad day, or when you have when you have questions, or I firmly believe that human connections and human interactions are just not negotiable. Like without them, you wouldn't be able to exchange conversations that help you understand how close you are with someone. A text message isn't enough to gauge the relationship you have with someone. You need to be face-to-face with them. You need to have a video call with them. You need to engage and interact with them. And that helps you understand the relationship you have with them. And this is at a micro level. Now, if we go at a macro level, you could see that human connections will have a much, much bigger effect. So I think that the members of Gen Z becoming digital should not encompass them sacrificing that human connection.
Great. Julian, do you agree? Do you disagree? Where do you stand on this?
Yeah, I mean, this is like pretty similar to like what we're building at Rippling. And at least for us, it's in the professional sense. But I think that, there's this huge, I can probably go for days about the future of work. And what the future, or what I guess like what COVID has brought is a huge emergence in new technologies that are helping, making it easier to have that touch point with anyone, whether that's creating a connection and meeting new people, like lunch club, or helping you maintain your relationships, throughout COVID and beyond, like what we're doing at Rippling. There's a lot of these platforms that are coming out, and luckily we worked. We were working on this company before COVID, and when we saw the need. But even regardless of like COVID and everything, I think people are obviously digitally driven, extremely digitally driven. And instead of trying to pull people off to meet each other like in person, at least, well, sadly we can't do that right now, but have them have those kind of genuine touch points online, and how do we drive those kind of conversations forward? And then like, those would further lead into like in-person conversations, walking like a few feet apart, 6 feet apart, and just conversing back and forth. I think those are all like really, really awesome things. And so, there's a whole lot of things about like connectivity, driving, there's a huge thing about like creating asynchronous work calls where, it's not set schedule. You can just pick up the phone and call anyone that's on your team and stuff like that. There's a huge place where, there's a huge motivation for new technologies to encourage people to reach out in one click, reach out to someone that's one click away, in terms of like a focus to help keep people better connected and stuff like that. So I think it's all moving in the right direction, even during COVID, and also it'll be a good direction for post-COVID as well.
Jessica, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I think there's going to be new tools to help people, or there already have been new tools to help people to manage their relationships. And so I think a lot of it, so I guess two parts. So one is what I've realized during COVID, when, venture is obviously a very network heavy driven industry. And so I was a little bit worried, as I'm sure a lot of people are worried, about not being able to meet people in person once COVID hit. And then obviously became pretty clear that it was going to be going on for a long time. But then what I've realized, it's been like 5 months of COVID, as in quarantine for COVID, and I haven't obviously been meeting people this whole time. I know people are doing like socially distanced walks and stuff, but I'm actually not in the city, and so haven't even been able to do that. But I've actually been able to make lots of really close relationships with other investors, with founders, etc. And I like look back and I realize I've never met them in person, but I actually just think of them as like a good friend and somebody I really trust, and somebody I would share deal flow with, as well as get a coffee or like drinks with after COVID. And so I think there's going to be a normalizing of relationships, maybe not like the romantic relationships, but like friendships and professional relationships that are purely taking place over Zoom or over virtual technologies. And so I think people can really take advantage of that, because there's so many investors that I maybe would have never met if I was restricting myself to San Francisco or New York or like wherever I was located. But they seemed really wonderful, and we've been able to work a lot together and do a lot of good things together. And so I think there's going to be a broadening of like who you see can be in your network of like trusted friends or colleagues or other kind of professional collaborators. And I think the second part is, with all the tools that will help you manage your relationships, I think there's an opportunity for companies like that to, I guess, think about ways to make relationship building still rather spontaneous and rather organic. Because I think we've almost shifted to the other side of the pendulum, where everybody, I know I'm definitely, a person who does this, of like being super systematic around maintaining my contacts. And I think that's important to do. Like, you want to be organized, you want to be thoughtful, but I think it almost removes like the spontaneity or like the organic conversations or interactions or connections that can happen. And so whether it's with new people or people already in your network. And so I think there's an opportunity for existing or new tools to kind of think, not like build totally around that, because there's certainly still a need for structure, but I think to be able to build out features or additions or kind of incorporate some level of balance between kind of both sides of the spectrum.
Great. So Palash, I want to bring you in on the next question first, which is to frame this correctly. We've been talking a lot about sort of near-term trends, things that are happening during the pandemic, but to sort of zoom out a little bit, what does the year 2030 look like with regards to Gen Z, and in particular with regards to advancements in technology? So Use your imagination, paint a picture for us, Palash.
Yeah, so kind of connecting the previous question to this one as well. In 2030, so right now, as a lot of the other people have said, that there's quite a lot of tools that help us build these human connections. But I think that a lot of these tools build on the technology and the types of connections that you can build that have already existed previously. And I think like in a lot of other technology sectors where you kind of have that one groundbreaking change, or like how the iPhone introduced touchscreen devices, we're still waiting for that product or that company that kind of completely changes how we do human connection over technology. And I think we haven't seen that yet in the current environment. So I think in 2030, I think by then we'll have something that kind of completely changes how we communicate with people online. And while hopefully by 2030 we don't have this pandemic and we can meet with people in person, we still have the technological component that helps kind of bridge the two, reality and technological online meeting. And then additionally, in 2030, I think that from my side, since I work a lot in AI related stuff, I think artificial general intelligence will be very prominent. And a lot of people might not know this, but there's a company called OpenAI that recently released something called GPT-3, which is a 183 billion parameter model, which essentially acts as a general artificial intelligence language model. So you can give it almost any statement and it will produce. I can say, generate Barack Obama's speech, and it will modify and mimic Barack Obama's speech language and kind of construct a speech for you. So I think that artificial general intelligence will be prevalent, and also will have made a leap in forming human connection over technology that we haven't formed yet.
Great. So let's move into the wrap up because we're sort of running out of time here. Let's start with Samir. Let me give you a minute. What is one message that you want to leave the audience with? Samir?
Yeah. I would say that I have like a few, but I'll combine it into one. I think that and I'll take this from Steve Jobs. I know it's going to sound cliche, but like our time is actually short, and it's important that we kind of block out the external pressures that we experience in our friend groups and our professional networks and personal networks, and actually try to find something that you're genuinely passionate about, because then your work doesn't actually become work, and you can truly become creative in whatever you do. That's one thing that's very important, because sometimes people don't find those motivating things until they're in their late 20s, 30s, or 40s. So it's almost essential for you to continuously explore new things in order to find what that true passion is. And that can take a long time.
Right.
As long as you're constantly challenging yourself and exploring new things, you'll find out what you're passionate about. And the last thing I'd say is that many people want to work on new things, try out new things, switch jobs, start a new workout or explore new interests. The time to do it is now. There's never a time in the future. It's not until you get a graduate degree. It's not when you pass a certain exam, when you work at a certain company, when you develop a very specific skill. The time is to start doing it now, because then other people will do it. So I think that if people start waiting, they're not going to accomplish the things that they want, because there are other people who are going to do that. And so it's never going to be a time in the future. The time is now to start doing whatever you want.
So Jessica, I know you have to go. Do you just want to chime in with the one thing you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to remember that, frankly, your decisions, you're the only one who has to live with them. And so I think so many times people think so much about what society wants them to do or what their parents want them to do, or things like that. And I think I did think about that for probably like the first 20 years of my life, and it was like really debilitating. And so I think it's really important to think less about like how you can de-risk yourself endlessly, and think much more about, obviously you want a baseline of security, going to college, getting a good education, doing the best you can during that period of time. But then I think after, you should really focus on your interests and think less about, how to keep climbing a ladder to know unaware, whether it's titles or industries or what society tells you should be the next step, and think much more about what you actually want to do, and think more about self-discovery, and realize that ultimately you're the only main character of your story, and you always think people will think about you, but they actually are thinking about themselves like 99% of the time. And so I think that's super important to keep in mind. Unfortunately, I have to jump for something for work, but it was super great to be here, and I imagine contact information, etc., is available somewhere. But thanks so much again.
Thank you. Great. Julian, you want to chime in here on the one thing you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar to everyone else. I think just cut out all the pressures that surround you. Just focus on yourself. That's helped me certainly, not even just through through startup, but just through life. Your path is unique. It's not about getting from A to B. It's about getting from A to AA, A to AB, and every milestone. So there's something to celebrate. I'm a huge optimist. I mean, at least that's something that you have to be as a founder. But I think everyone should have optimism in light, no matter what the setback is. Like, there's always something to learn, and there's another way to get around it. And I think that's super, super important overall. So yeah, just go out there, try things, and your next big opportunity might be just like one email away. So that's what I always think.
Great. Palash, you want to chime in here? So everyone else has been super optimistic. I know that you're a little bit more of a pessimistic guy. What's your take on this?
So I don't know if my take on this is like fairly pessimistic, but I would say, like, to keep it short, crazy is good. So if you, in terms of innovation, if you think that something is not possible, let's say you have an idea that's just completely crazy, there's no way this is possible. That's good. That's what you should be taking up, and what you should be pursuing for the foreseeable future, because that's kind of what I've been doing. If I find something that's absolutely crazy, then that is what my mind obsesses about. And generally, if you make something that's seemingly impossible possible, then that will make real change. If people already think that this can be done, that what you're doing can be done, then it would have already been done, right? So when you're thinking about what you want to do and how you want to innovate, the more crazier the idea, I wouldn't say ridiculous, but just in general, the more out of the box, out of this world the idea is, the better it is for you, and the more successful it will probably be if you pull it off. Yeah, thank you.
Great. So we got a pretty pessimistic take there. Everyone, thank you so much for joining. This has been a fantastic conference and great discussion. And thank you for the honor of letting me be the facilitator. Anyone else with any final thoughts for the audience?
I was going to throw one last thing, and as a perfect piggyback to what was previously said. Seek discomfort. Yes theory, I just take it from them. If you seek discomfort, you'll get better and better every single time if you think you're not. So that's a phrase I always take with me. So we'll leave it on a positive note.
Perfect. It's a great way to end it, Julian. The star of this channel. Let's leave it at that. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for the great insights. That was great. And all of you guys are around the Gen Z age range, I'm pretty sure. And definitely interesting learning from older Gen Z people than me. And I can definitely take a lot from it. And I'm sure the audience can as well. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you as well.
And we will end with a short closing note. Wow, honestly, I'm truly overwhelmed with the wonderful insights that I gained from each of the panelists and facilitators. I sincerely hope that all of the viewers did as well. And I have to admit that I was quite nervous when I first started this planning for the summit and my thoughts about it. I like to credit the eminent speakers, panelists, and facilitators, and my parents for fulfilling the vision of the summit. First of all, I'd like to thank our amazing keynote speaker, Dr. Corey Seemiller, for sharing her vast amount of knowledge with us and her insightful perspectives. She's very experienced, and we definitely learned a lot, and it's very relevant for Gen Zers. And a few things that I gathered from her talk were that Gen Z was actually divided into big Zs from 1995 to 2002 and little Zs from 2002 to 2010. I'm actually on the upper end of the little Zs, where Mia and my sister belong to. I honestly didn't know that. It was very interesting. And I'd also like to express my gratitude to all of the panelists from all 4 panels, along with the facilitators from the panels, who kept the panel discussions very interesting and entertaining. Here's some key takeaways that I captured from the panel discussions. From the cross-generational communication panel, I thought it was really interesting how various interesting attributes of communications were used between different generations, such as social media, video, short text versus long emails across generations, and how Gen Z wants to be treated as equals rather than less important to older generations. And it's always important to respect true human connections and be flexible, respectful, and transparent. And from the second panel, Entrepreneurship and Innovation, I learned a lot about how there's various influences on Gen Z to develop an entrepreneurship mindset while growing up, which leads to them being entrepreneurs when they grow up, as they take more risks and they fail fast as a way to innovate faster, and they want to be financially independent, which helps them grow in the future. And they learn from the experience of previous generations. And the key to successful entrepreneurship is knowing your why, your mission, your passion, and success. Financial benefits and reputation will follow along with that. And this resonated with me very much as I created this Gen Z Leaders organization, as there's lots of failures, lots of things that didn't come into place as I wanted them to, but always have to make the best of your situation and try to keep moving on. And from the Global Perspectives panel, the one I facilitated, it's very interesting how there are many problems and challenges, such as awareness of communication barriers, the influence and exposure to social media, and not being taken seriously as a Gen Z member, and not being included in key decision making. There's lots of interesting challenges that I simply did not know about before, and how being technology savvy increases the ability to communicate and collaborate globally with other people. For example, this global summit would not have been possible without technology. It's very interesting how everything comes together over time. And key things that matter to Gen Z are purpose and passion-driven lifestyle, and wanting to be heard and wanting their voice to be heard, wanting to be listened to, advocacy on diversity, inclusion, human rights, and movements such as the Go Green movement towards sustainability and wanting to make a positive impact to the world as a whole. And from the panel that just happened, the Emerging Technologies panel, I learned about how Gen Zers are going to be catalysts for rapid adaptation of emerging technologies to their natural flair, technological literacy, passion, and innovative mindsets. And focusing on soft skills would definitely make the Gen Zers more well-rounded, as it would augment their tech skills very well. Once again, many thanks to our eminent keynote speaker, expert panelists, and our wonderful facilitators. I'd also like to thank my mentors and my parents for helping me execute this global summit with speakers from 6 different countries across 4 different continents. Stay tuned to genz-leaders.com for many such exciting events in the future. And last and definitely not the least, COVID-19 has made a lasting impact on mankind in general and Gen Zers in particular, despite all the global challenges. It has made us resilient and united as one mankind to fight against this global disaster. Thank you all once again and stay safe. Bye.